All right. I got to do some technical things here real quick, and then I'm going to give you full attention here. Sorry. We're all alone here. I'm all alone with our guest for episode 68, so bear with me just 1 second. All right, we're ready to go. All right, everyone. Welcome to season 3. Happy New Year. This is our first episode in 2025. And I am honored to this. It's a weekend episode. We've only had the second weekend episode. But I'm joined by retired commander. Everybody get ready for this. If you see his name on the screen, I've been trying to practice this. Vorachai, we're going to call him Chai after this. Sribanditmongkol.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Awesome.
I did it one time, and that's it. So we're gonna, as we talk, he goes by the nickname Bandit. We're gonna stick to that, or Chai. I can remember that a little bit. So we got Chai with Che and Che with Chai. It's gonna be
that's a new show. That might be a new show.
Chai and Che. Yeah, it's a good one. So
Dan and Che, Chai and Che.
But yeah, Chai is we'll get into it, but is a retired commander of the United States Navy. And if you've seen in the post, long career, 30 years, I think might be the second longest career that we've had on.
Yeah.
Another Navy guy as well.
I probably looked that now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I looked like a paper boy.
And I feel like you're a little bit older than me, which is good. You graduated in 89.
89. Yeah.
I'm a 90 guy. So
there you go. I
always love being the young guy in the group. So
there you go.
But like always, we always start off the show with a quote here. And so today, the first quote, we're going to quote a famous nurse. I think you should know who she is, Clara Barton. I may be compelled to face danger, but never fear it. And while our soldiers can stand and fight, I can stand and feed and nurse them. So, and what's great is having a nurse. We'll talk about that more. Is there's so many great nursing quotes that you can go out there and find out.
Yeah, hopefully you're not going to quiz me on.
No. Like, do you have a favorite nurse quote at all or no?
Oh goodness, Nothing's jumping in my mind. My mom had a great impact on me as far as being a nurse. Yeah. So I can hear words that she said or essence of what she said that's impacted my my life and the way I look and view nursing, especially being a man in nursing. Yeah, that's gonna be it, because I think I shared you my son's a nurse. Oh, yeah. Oh, cool.
That's what she is. So good topic.
Fantastic.
But let's start with growing up. Let's talk about young Chai, young Bandit.
Chai. Oh my gosh, he was a mess.
Like all,
he was a mess. He was a mess. He was involved with. I will use he because third person. I feel like George Costanza. George is getting very nervous here. No, I'd say if I to look back at my childhood, I think it was for the most part a good childhood. I think that there were elements as I became more aware as a teenager that things maybe weren't as good as I had thought or had hoped, or compared to other people. That's probably the big thing, because usually trauma doesn't, when it's normal to you, you feel like everything is, it's status quo. Everything's normal. I'm the typical kid. It's when you start being aware of your surroundings and your peers and who has what and how they dress and how they act and what their families' involvements are at school activities and things like that. That's when you start kind of picking out some of the things. And then just like as you listen to your parents and how they communicate with one another, you see those types of things. But for the most part, I'd say that I was very involved with extracurricular activities. The arts was a big thing. Did drawing, visual kind of arts, performing arts, sang, was in show choir, was in musicals, played the trumpet, was in various bands, jazz band, ensemble bands, to marching bands. Really enjoyed that. I would say that I was also involved in sports and athletics, and I think that probably gave me a lot of the competitive edge and that competitiveness that I probably still have to today, to some extent, the game, so to speak, of life. My brother, my younger brother, my sister, we grew up within 2 to 4 years of each other. And we also had a brother that was about 15 years younger than me anyways. And my mom would call us bookends, myself and my youngest brother. But the three of us that were closest together in age, we grew up and we did all the sports, from soccer to baseball to swim team was a big thing. And I remember everyone cheering as we would swim, Chai, Nai, Ollie. They would just have this chant. And if you're doing breaststroke, if you can imagine doing the breaststroke, you would hear these things as you come up for air, which was kind of nice. So for the most part, I think that part of childhood was really, really good. It taught me a lot of things. The one thing I probably struggled with doing all those things and doing okay in school was the management, the balance of the schedule, the timing of things. Probably not staying up late or anything like that, but just being so tired from the activities, especially like as I got into high school, that the balance of getting your homework done and we didn't have a lot of computer technology then and a lot of things like that. So a lot of stuff was required for you to be in the library to get resources to do papers and, you still had to do your math homework and stuff like that. Well, that stuff, I would get to it when I got to it. And lots of times I'd fall asleep doing it. So the productivity or the performance on those academic measures very quickly went downhill for me. So I, like early 80s, going through high school, almost didn't graduate high school, which was, upsetting to myself. I could make excuses for why this and that and the other, but probably the biggest thing within my family was, that pride. You're the first child. You're that pressure. You had the ball. You had one job, right?
And you're blowing it, Sean.
Yeah, I'm blowing it. You're on face value. You look great. You're out there singing, dancing, doing soccer, and doing all those different things, and swimming, and you get along with everybody. It seems like, but that element of letting people down. I think that's when I first got a sense of that, and maybe not being somewhere on time because there were no organizers. I didn't have, Siri, Alexa or Siri to help you out or calendars like that. So, which I use very heavily now. So I owe a lot of success to that as well as my wife, probably keeping me in line. But I would say that, those were big challenges that came up. There's some personal family types of things that, affect you and things like that as well. But yeah, childhood, young Chai, I think had a decent childhood. I think towards the end of the pressures of not either almost graduating with high school, I think that kind of created either a void or fire under the butt, so to speak, to kind of make some change. And that kind of led me into, all my other friends were very smart, getting into colleges, getting scholarships, full ride scholarships in the colleges of their dreams. And I was just like, okay. I started the applications for college and just didn't either see them through or then came to the realization like, no one's going to select me, so I need to do something. I need to make some change. And that's kind of when the military, Top Gun, I think came out like the year or two beforehand. I thought they were pretty cool in their uniforms,
Top Gun got a lot of people into the Navy, I feel like now.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was like looking into that. And my friend Dan, who may or may not be listening, he got a ROTC scholarship for the Navy and he went to Northwestern. I was like, very good school, and the Navy's paying for this opportunity for him to get his education and he'll do well by it. And he served for a handful of years and did very well. We called him Lieutenant Dan, Forrest Gump, but he was a Lieutenant Dan at the time and I was still kind of enlisted at the time. I joined the Navy in '89 and went into, you would have thought I was motivated by Top Gun and things like that, but I ended up going submarines. Yeah.
So before we get into that, like, growing up, anybody else in your family in the military? Like why was the military the next stop for
That's a good question. I think a lot of people have a strong lineage of uncles and brothers and aunts and moms and everybody in military service. And at the time, when I think about it, why did I choose the military? Why I chose the Navy? I really didn't have that perspective or foundation or even an understanding of knowing if anybody in the family had been in the military. There was one at the time, my mom's niece, who would be my cousin. She was in the Air Force and I'd heard stories about her. She was enlisted probably as like a flight medic type of person. And then she became a nurse corps officer in the Air Force and made a career of it. So that was probably the one person I knew. I knew my mom had a distant cousin. I think his name was Harley. He joined the Navy. I think I don't know if he made it a career. I think he made it, he did his service time and then he got out. So those are the really only two that I can think back at now that maybe were there that might have had some sort of impact. I think as time went on, I think understanding the story of my mom's cousin who was a nurse, and that she went from enlisted to become an officer, that was more of a story that was kind of clinging on to as far as a template to see the possibilities of military service and things like that. But yeah, there's just two.
So any heroes growing up as a kid?
Oh my gosh.
Besides Maverick?
Yeah, Maverick, Magnum PI,
yeah.
all those guys. Grew up in the 80s, so a lot of the things that were on TV, movies. I love movies and TVs. It's an escape. It's a vacation, a cheap vacation. Any Harrison Ford character from Indiana Jones that was probably one of the biggest things. When military, we mentioned Top Gun, you have the young whippersnapper guys at the time, Tom Cruise and things like that. But yeah, probably as far, and it seems very superficial, but like movies, I would say like a Harrison Ford character, like Indiana Jones, somebody that's very inquisitive, heroic, and brave, can solve problems. And I think of the things that I've tried to do without like tying them to any person, but the things that they embody and things that I feel like that there's maybe some sort of impact. Christopher Reeve, Superman, huge big fan, and just that genre of movies and the arts and things like that. But his portrayal, I think, came out very early in my childhood. I think I might have been like I don't know, 8 or 10 when that came out, and that was kind of a life-changing as a small child, if you could be life-changed at that point, but just somebody that kind of really inspired me without knowing the rest of the world and the politics and government and things like that. I'd say my mom and my dad are obviously heroes of mine. I was the oldest child, so it's like, you could look down at your younger siblings, but they're looking to you. And there's a lot of pressure being that first child. But, my mom had gone through a lot of challenges in her life to get to where she was, and her potential and her impacts on me as a person, as a nurse, as a human being, as a husband. My dad, the same thing. He came from Thailand, and Bangkok, Thailand. So very humble beginnings, and the bravery it took to come to a better place, to make a life for yourself, even if it was you're a young guy and you're having fun and things like that. Just that bravery to get on to a plane and you've never been to the country, to start a life and not knowing whatever that would be and how that impact would be on, a family member or a son or a child or like that. I think.
So how old was your dad when he came over?
Oh my goodness. I think he was probably, early 20s. I'd say probably maybe 22 or 3, maybe a little younger, but if you looked at him back then, he'd probably even look a lot younger than his age. Right. Because I know when I graduated high school, I was 110 pounds. I looked like somebody's paper boy, and I was a paper boy. So, but even up into my 20s, I looked very, very young. So my dad looked even younger, I think, at those ages. Yeah,
I saw your basic training picture you say though. That's was like, man, we all were looking young at the time. I was like, you look really young in that one. Like probably.
Yeah. And I look 110 pounds, probably wet. Yeah.
I only laughed about the Thailand thing because my wife and I and my middle son were watching a movie the other day, and I don't know what my wife was doing, but it's normal when she's watching movies, she's not paying attention or falls asleep. But they came up on the screen, Bangkok, Thailand, where they're at, right? And then so it's like 5 minutes into that whole scene. It's kind of a flashback, and my wife's like, well, where are they at? And I love messing with my wife about stuff like that when she's not paying attention. I was like, they're in Bangkok, Thailand. And she's like, how do you know that? And a part of me was going to come up with some story about how I saw something and it recognized it. And I was like, because there was white lettering that said they were in Bangkok. And my wife's like, thank you that you did not do that, because I would have fallen for it. I'm like, dang it. So it's just funny that
there'll be other opportunities, I'm sure.
It happens every day. It's great. So I have to pick and choose, because then when, something really happens, she doesn't believe me. So like the boy that cries wolf. So gotta be careful. I hear you. And the oldest child, that seems very similar to me too. There's a lot of, everyone always feel sorry for the middle child, right? I feel like, but being an oldest child in a lot of families are rough too. For me, it was a lot of expectations, a lot of uncharted water that, I don't want to say my parents were living through me, but it was definitely like, my my upbringing, I didn't have somebody that did that. I was the first person to go to college, so there wasn't somebody who could, my parents had no idea about filling out applications and any of that kind of stuff. So that's definitely a lot of pressure that people don't realize, especially for us. Like you talked about this thing called the library. These kids don't, realize it now. They don't know how good it is, but yeah, there's just being, and especially, I don't know. I feel like our generation was harder because there wasn't the internet to look at some stuff and how easy it was, like deciding colleges. I went to a college that I didn't even see in person. I just saw it in the brochure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I talked to nobody about
what's
it.
the brochure? Right?
Yeah, exactly. This place looks pretty cool. Look at that. I'm going to go there.
Is that a TikTok thing?
Yeah. You're like looking through it like, oh, it seems like a good thing to go.
Yeah.
Like now kids are going on like 27 different.
Oh yeah. It's, for whatever we feel that maybe hindered us or kept us innocent or whatnot, with social media and all the different media outlets and even just visual resources that folks have today. We would think that it makes it easier for them to make decisions, but I would think that sometimes for some people, circumstances, it can be an overwhelming task. So I think, and it's an exciting time, but a lot of anxiety that goes into, if I'm going to go to college, am I ready for college? Am I the right person? A lot of pressure. And if you're that first child, sometimes, and I'll use 80 references, you're our only hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? You're that first child that will set the pace for your younger siblings that will either look to your successes and follow suit or going the other way around. So I felt that, and it was overall, it was exciting. It was exciting for me to see all my friends and things like that. But it was a lot of kind of in real time self-reflection, not even knowing how to even self-reflect being that young when I look at myself now and understand the world and understand those things. And then I think that's where I think, and maybe it was the movies or my friend getting a scholarship that kind of led me to the military. Seems like it might be something that might, bring me clarity as well as provide me some sort of foundation, teach me a technical skill. I love to troubleshoot, and those types of things like that. So, and for the most part, I think it did initially. Being enlisted, being on submarines, you are very much detached from the rest of the world intentionally, and you're there to create a deterrence to maintain peace. But as a young, 18, 19-year-old, maybe 20-year-old in that setting, I don't even think, other than the task of doing what you need to do in your job, I don't think that that's all there, or it can be. And you're just trying to do the best you can, do your job, have some fun along the way. And the one thing that I did was look for opportunities for education, because I knew that I wasn't ready probably for when I graduated high school. I was lucky enough to graduate. So that was like a very big milestone, but I probably knew, and I was at least wise enough to know that I probably wasn't ready, but I knew I wanted to be, and I had to figure out a way. And that was kind of the opportunity to see where that would take me. So.
Yeah, I think our generation, it's interesting because like I was talking to some guys this morning about this, and one of the guys brought it up, Jake, that, like our age, we didn't have like get on the phone. And if you were curious about something, like you could like look it up. Like my kids ask questions and I'm like, dude, just look it up. Like you have libraries of information to you. But I feel like our generation, like the curiosity kind of like led to responsibility. We're talking about that today a little bit, we, I mean, if you were curious, and you became, it led to responsibility. Like it was good to be curious. Like now I don't think there's the curiosity is gone out of some things, which I really think like there's no, it's just a strange time when you think about like I kind of like those days of curiosity. Like I still like with like friends, if you're talking about something or can't remember a name of something, I hate when people just grab their phone right away and cheat. It's like like sitting there and struggle with it and like what was the person's name, and then like don't look. But now there's that just instant But there's I guess now, but the curiosity part could be, we had to deal with our curiosity or cure it by doing something. I mean, that's why I go to the responsibility part of it. But that curiosity, it goes away so fast. There's such a information overload that they can just get it. And a lot of aspects to me, it's like you're getting somebody else's experience out of it, not necessarily yours. I think that's a lot.
Yeah. Someone did the homework for you. You just put in the right key phrase, key search terms, and there you go, got the answer, which is good. You might be resourceful, you figure out certain search terms, but yeah, it's just, and the gratification is more instant than us. We might have to go through various avenues to get to an answer or an opportunity, or whatever that might be, a job or this and that and the other. And
yeah, it's just like things like when you think about, when you talk about like just basic like navigation and moving, like, like when I moved to Fort Hood, Texas, I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew people over there, but like there was no GPS. It was like, get a map, plot a map, there's just all these like things that I feel like don't get me wrong. I love, GPS and all the technology things, but I feel like it was a different time and just created some different people and different opportunities. Like, how do you do this stuff? Like you figured it out. Like that's a lot of it how it was. And sometimes you got it right and sometimes you didn't.
Yeah.
Which is
trial and error is a lot different now than it was back then. Now, before, it could make a difference in the direction that you go, or a door being slammed in your face. Whereas trial and error now is search terms that result into an immediate correct answer. Maybe it's the wrong answer or whatnot. But you asked me about heroes, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. I said Superman, Indiana Jones, Rocky Balboa, the character, Sylvester Stallone's character, I think had a lot of impact on me, because this is somebody that took the punches, for better for worse, started from humble beginnings, had money, lost his money, still had his family, had his love and his drive. And, he rolled with the punches and he figured out a way to kind of overcome them. And I feel like that had a lot of, I think, influence on how I handle things. And I always tell my kids, and I'm sure I seem very old, and they may not even get the reference. I'm like, you have to have the eye of the tiger. I feel like as the oldest kid, you always had to have that. I mean, even before that was a song or a montage in a Rocky movie, I felt like we had to have it, because our family, there was such emphasis on, you're the oldest, you're setting the example, you're doing all these things, you need to be better, there's much sacrifice that led up to us even having you, so there's always that feeling of having to maybe not pave the way, but somewhat, you're kind of pioneering what you can for your family. And looking at it back then, you don't understand it. You just feel like, oh my God, they're always so hard on me. You look at it now, you're like, okay, I get it. But then where I am now with my family, you look back and reflect on your own life, but then your parents and where they are, for better, for worse, for the traumas that they experienced, for the path and the hard work that they achieved to get to where they were, even if it was not where they wanted to be, it affected your life and your surroundings and things like that. And I think, it's unfortunate that when we have our parents, or when they're younger, we can't necessarily show that appreciation or have that understanding. And but it takes years later, and then sometimes even after they're gone, to where we have that realization, either having kids of our own and going through it and struggles. But that
definitely is the phase of when you thought your parents, and your dad, they were idiots and don't know what they're talking about, but it is, it took me probably about 50 years to figure out, my mom and dad were doing the best they could, with the best of their knowledge, at the time. So instead of making them wrong, just kind of, have grace for them and understanding. And especially with a story like yours, with, your dad probably had you, comes to a country, and then a few years later, Chai comes along, and there's a lot of, and a lot of that stuff with, I feel like my parents, when I look back, I know a lot of it was them trying to make it better for me, but I don't think they necessarily knew how all the time. And it assigned a lot of bullshit to that, and used that for a lot of excuses for many years, but now it's okay.
And they do the best they can, and we do the best we can, and we, like them as well as others, will make mistakes, right? That have that can have positive effects on people, because it motivates them to get out and do something different, or it perpetuates, right? And then it becomes sadly enough, it can become part of a legacy, right? We have baggage, we have things that we can't unless we bring it out and talk about it and deal with it. There's usually a trigger that brings it out, at the most inopportune time. So I feel like that's still something that, even that parents maybe aren't parenting. My mom's passed and my dad's older, they're not parenting directly like how they used to, but that still has its effect. And I think we're just different people now. We reflect on it and how it affects our own parenting, and then how we react and interact with others, and what we choose to share and not share, or hold close to our chest until something throws us off balance to where it comes out, and maybe it comes out not in the best way.
Yeah.
But those are kind of like, red flags, or at least yellow flags to like, hey, I need help, or maybe someone else needs help, and we need to figure out a way, if we care, to do something about it, even if we don't feel like we're armed with the tools and the knowledge to do so. There's still a need that needs to be addressed. So, yeah. But for the most part, I think my childhood was decent, and I think my entry to the military service isn't so unique to other people. It might not have been academic reasons for people getting in, although I'm sure some people do. But at least for enlisting, sometimes it's an escape. Sometimes it's like escape from yourself, your situation, to own what you're doing going forward, and kind of get away from difficult situation. And there were difficult times.
So do you feel like you were escaping a little bit?
I think so. Like, I think when I came back, it was interesting, because I remember having a conversation with my mom and my dad. My dad was always at work doing stuff, or, and we had a discussion about it before, that sometimes you're at work all the time because that's your way of coping, not having to be at home all the time. So I think that might've been part of it. Maybe there's this obligation to duty and being there and being responsible for his troops and stuff like that. So my mom, a lot of times, even after her long days of work, was left with us a long time. And there were times, and again, it was the 80s, when you think of the Goonies and things like that, kids seemed like they were on their own, managing I was the oldest, so I was managing my other two at the same time. So I felt like we were the Goonies to some extent. But I feel like, when I presented this to my mom, like, hey, I'm just letting you know, I'm already graduated high school. I'm like, I'm gonna get out of here. Don't worry about it. I'm going to the military. And it would be nice if it was handled that calmly. If I said, hey, I'm a big boy, I think we're gonna do this. But I think probably when I informed my family, it was in a perspective of probably, I'll show you. It was kind of like, I'll show you, or it wasn't in a good place where it was just rational and made sense. This seems like a good plan. It probably seemed like it was more emotionally driven when I look at my own childhood. And then probably if I was the parent hearing that, I'm thinking, they're not thinking things through. They're just making a rash decision. This wasn't Vietnam War. It wasn't Korean War. We were in a Cold War at the time, but I don't know if everyone really understood that and what that meant, other than there might be some nuclear weapons out there somewhere. But so I think when I presented that initial thought, I think that they might have thought I was either just talking to talk, or I was just pissed or whatever. But maybe I was, and there probably was an element of that, I think, but I took the initiative. I knew deep down inside that I needed to do something, and whether it was for purposes of escape, or growing, or trying to prove to them that despite my track with my last year or so of high school and my performance and barely getting through, that I can do it. I'm going to do this on my own. And I think that was probably my biggest motivation. But I think how it was probably taken initially was probably like, oh, you're just running away from your problems. And sometimes you need to kind of get away from certain stressors or certain environments to be able to see if you could make it on your own, and lean on that, and then gain that perspective and appreciation for what you left and the people that are still in the situation, to maybe help support them better than you could being in the environment. And I think that's kind of like where that all kind of evolved into me being in the military service. But I take great pride in the fact that regardless of that initial news to my family, that, I was able to make it what I kind of envisioned, and really worked hard, and they were very much reciprocated the amount of pride that they had, because they were scared. If my child now, children now, I mean, I have a 19-year-old and a 23-year-old, if they were deciding that they wanted to go to the military, I might think I had an influence on that, but at the same time, I might caution them. I might be scared for them, and that's a normal thing for a parent to feel. But I think the amount of pride for whatever they go into, if it's military service or government service or even the private sector, I think when you know that they can make it on their own, that they're trying so hard to do that, then that pride is there. And I don't have any regrets as far as that, what led me into service.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you decided to join the Navy,
mm-hmm.
and you become a missile technician?
Yeah. The rating, your job title was initially, when I went through the recruiters, they said, you're going to go, you qualify for submarines. You want to do that? And I thought, sure, whatever. I had no clue. Again, Top Gun was the only thing in my head. But I did that. I thought, oh, cool. These are these little high tech things. It's probably gonna be like a spaceship. Cool. It wasn't like a spaceship, but it kind of was. Yeah. So my job was fire technician ballistic, FTB. That was the old school rating. A few years into that, after I'd been non-commissioned officer, enlisted E5, E4, E5, we combined rates with the missile technicians. So we were responsible originally for like targeting and the computer maintenance and all those neat things that, and you have to go through advanced schooling for that. So you learn your trade, and we combined rates with the missile technicians who actually did the physical maintenance, any kind of fixing that had to be done with the missile housing units or the missiles in general, or components, physical components. So we combined rates. So we had to share that knowledge. We were going to be competitive with one another for advancement and things like that. And I think being the FTB, you had the advantage because you had all the technical, strategic type of things like that. So you had to learn this other aspect of it. And I found it very fascinating. I thought, this is cool. I'm like working with rockets on a submarine. Like, who can say that, but I think that when it came to thinking, like, is this something that's going to last? Is this something that we're always going to have? Of course, but is this something that's going to translate to the civilian market? If at some point I get out without a degree at that point, what am I going to do? So it came to that self-reflection. And at that point, I was really kind of listening to my mom, who was a nurse, and her stories. And she shared with me my cousin's story with going from enlisted to becoming a nurse corps officer in the Air Force. And at that time, I'm starting to look at opportunities to see what kind of scholarships opportunities that there existed in the Navy. And there was a Navy Nurse Corps scholarship for ROTC. And there's been other kind of names to it, medical enlisted commissioning program, seaman to admiral. There's all kinds of things that can get enlisted folks into a commissioning program that's specific to nursing. And that's kind of what led me to that. But yeah, just doing cool technical stuff. And it's nice to have those stories and that
Just go back to the sub. So you're the second submariner, submariner that we've had. Was that the right?
I've heard it both ways, and I take pride in either one. Submariner. Yeah, either way.
So you're the first enlisted. The other guy was a submariner officer.
Yep.
So USS Mariano Vallejo?
Vallejo. Yep.
Okay, so SSBN, what does that mean again?
It was the type of submarine that had the capability of carrying nuclear weapons, nuclear missiles, not just torpedoes, not just your ICBM level.
So it wasn't attack, then it was
no. So we were the bigger, if you think of us, we were not the biggest whale, so to speak, in the ocean, but we were a big, we had the capability of having at least the type of submarine platform that we had, up to 16 ICBM capability.
Because he always talked, he was an officer on both, and
the fast attacks are like,
he said the fast attack the way to go. But
they saw, I think there's probably a lot more excitement with them. They do a lot of operational exercises and interactions with other subs and other surface ships. They see a lot more ports because it's really difficult to take a big, large submersible platform that has a nuclear reactor and nuclear weapon capability and coming into a port. Some ports don't like that. Some countries may not be hesitant to allow to come in. And then your mission is a lot different than your fast attack submarines, even though they kind of look like the same. It's they share commonalities, but they have a different.
You're supposed to be where they don't know you're at. And
we're all secret, and we're there for deterrence and things like that. But it was a good time. I had great colleagues that I worked with that were just like me, and that were there for the same reasons or there for other reasons. And there were genius people, and you just wonder, why are you here? But you dealt with, you interacted and worked well with those folks. And I had great leadership at the time that supported my efforts to seek other opportunities.
So on the submarine, the bigger the submarines was still, good thing you were small though. That felt big to you. But scariest thing that happened to you on the submarine?
So thanks for acknowledging my height. 5'4". So my leading petty officers in my leadership would say that, Bandit, you were genetically engineered for submarine life. And to an extent, they were probably right, because my one leader was probably 6'7", and I swear he would have to lean over all the time. So I felt fortunate in that regards. And there's plus or minuses in that. Sometimes you end up, we do store loads where you have to load everything and everybody touches everything and you're short. So you go into the bilge and you're getting the last bit of shortening and all the stuff that you've already touched 3 or 4 times. And now it's heavy at the end of the day. So there's that. But yeah, it was a neat experience, and I'm not sure if I don't think I answered your question because I think I just
the word like the scariest thing on the sub.
Yeah,
like any type
my height was the scariest thing.
They're putting you in spots. I don't want to go in there.
Yeah, no, I think because we had done so much drilling. When I say drilling, exercises, that at any given moment there could be a fire, there could be flooding, there could be nuclear weapons security violation. There could be a launch, right? Mm-hmm. So we were always constantly. So you would maybe get done with your watch and be done, go get something to eat, interrupt your meal to go do a drill. That a simulation is what we call it, right? So we call them drills, and you would get through that. So your body and your mental ability to cope with that environment. And it becomes a game, right? But you end up honing into those survival skills to some extent to where things are automatic. You're critically thinking, but it's very muscle memory. So there were many times that you just get to sleep and it's like ding, 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 man, battle stations missile, strategic launch. This is a drill. Oh, thank God it's a drill. But your body's already revved up to go. Yeah. So those were always, there wasn't one specific scariness to that, but I would say, depending on where you were in your sleep cycle, that might be the scariest point where you're waking up, not knowing if it's real. And then if it's a drill, your body's just really geared. Nuclear weapons security, nuclear emergency, where you would have a missile emergency where there'd be a fire or something like that, preparing for those instances, which would most likely lead to some sort of catastrophic loss of the ship. Those were probably the scariest scenarios. But then occasionally there would be a real thing where, and it seems like pretty minute, a fire in the laundry or dryer, right? Scary, because it could still incapacitate a ship. Flooding, we're in an encased steel tube. You don't want leaks, right? You don't want leaks. And so, we've seen like these things in the media with mini submersibles being lost due to catastrophic damage that occurs acutely, and there's no recovery from that. And those were so whether or not there was a scary episode that occurred, that fear is always with you. When you're awake, it's in the back of your head. When you sleep, might be the last thing you think of before you close. And then when you wake up, if it's to a drill, you never know. So that was the kind of environment that existed.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like you said, the hypervigilance, and then also, when you're talking about being out on patrols, like that was a real mission that was going on. All those you had those, that was a real deterrent mission that was going on in the Cold War. That when you guys went out to sea, it was really, you were doing your job. So I'm sure there's a lot of it, and that and what you were capable of doing, and what your mission is a lot. High stakes. Like you said, there's real small margin of error. Where you're at, being in a tube and the middle of the ocean, and
and the majority of your occupants and your personnel outside of the officer in chiefs are your probably 18 to 24-year-old. 24-year-old sailors. Yeah. So their understanding of their piece of the puzzle and the impact that they have. And maybe it's because, you're so young that, and I look at my kids now and I'm like, there are many times on the submarine outside of doing those technical things that you felt like it was boring. Like, what am I out here for? What am I doing? What's the question? What should I be doing? Should I get a job? Should I get out of the military? All those things still go through your head, while the severity and the significance of what actually you're doing, not knowing those impacts exist, and it's neat to have, number one, have lived and survived through all that, to be able to have a story and share and have conversations with folks that never experienced it, but then also with your friends that you pick up where you left off and things like that. So that's always nice. So I really cherish that time, and it seems like just a blip on my life and my career at this point, but it was a significant part of who I am even to this date.
It's crazy. Yeah, it probably seems like just yesterday too, and it was such a long time ago. But so One of the interesting things about that time frame we were talking about, what was like communications, like you said, about when you guys went out on patrols, what kind of communication did you have back with, family? Was there anything like that, or were you pretty isolated?
Yeah. So we talked about social media and talked about all the different things that people have at their 24/7 access. We had these things called, well, we didn't have internet. We didn't have emails. We had these things called radiograms or familygrams. And they were like, I think 38 word messages, really no bigger than an exaggerated fortune cookie. If you can think of a message that you pull out of that, I mean, that's the way they came out. And you would get messages. So I didn't have a significant other at that point, a girlfriend or anything like that. So I didn't have somebody kind of sending me those kind of messages. So the only people that could send me messages that were authorized to send me messages was my mom, my dad, brother, sister. So for the most part, my messages were from my mom. So, and sometimes you would get them maybe on a monthly basis, you might, right? Or maybe every other week, and they were very slow. And then those messages are also, they weren't censored, so to speak, but they were reviewed by officers, commanding officer, to see if, if somebody said somebody's sick and your grandma's sick, that might impact your mental health and your ability to cope with your current environment, to maybe take you out of the job and then affect the whole mission. So sometimes certain messages were withheld or censored, or maybe part of it would be taken out. And I remember distinctly one of my last messages that I got from my mom, and my little brother was really, really little at that time, but it was one of my last remaining ones before I got picked up for the scholarship. And I think I got part of it, and it was like, "Hey, we're doing good. Da da da. Wish you were here. We miss you." Those types of things like that. But then when we came back from patrol, we're getting ready to turn over and things like that. The radio men brought down the fortune cookie thing, and they said, "Here's the complete message. Go see the XO or CO if you have any questions." Da da da. And I was like, "What?" And it said something to the fact that my brother had strep throat or something like that, and or had a high fever and strep throat and da da da. We'll make sure he's okay. And something is, we would think that's probably benign. We'll get antibiotics for that. But when you're in such an isolated environment and you have to be able to do your job, it makes sense why those things are withheld from you for the mission, right? We looked beyond, and that CO or XO could have said, "It's nothing big, no big deal." But they have to put the mission first before each individual person, even though they care very much about the people. So it was nice to receive that message, and you laugh at it at the time, and then years later I reflect on it and I'm like, they did the right thing, that was our communication back then.
That's crazy because I heard that before, but you went in important detail about it than last time we talked about, which is mind blowing, because you really think about people would be like, "What do you mean that?" And there had to be, because it's not like if something happened. I think people have in mind like, okay, if your mom died, it's not like they're gonna take the submarine and be like, "Okay, we gotta take Chai out of here." Like that's not how it works. People don't. I think a lot of us get that, but a lot of people are like they don't. And I've heard people be like, "Oh, that's crazy that they do that. I'd do this," but yeah, that's just the way it is. I mean, I'm more interested. What was the process of your family? How did your family? Do you know how your family would get the messages to them? You get the message to you? Was it like, were they sending a letter and then somebody was like, how often could they do it?
So if I remember, I think I gave these strips of papers or whatever. It was a form, like a little Xerox machine, and they would send them in. And how our ship or whoever would transpond them to us, I think it just kind of went through the mail, got to them. So everything was already retrospective and delayed, anyways. And then however long it took these stations to transmit these messages and we had to be at a certain depth to be able to receive those messages in a certain area to receive them, certain time to receive them. And then we get them. And sometimes we get a lot, and sometimes they get garbled, so you don't always get everything. So sometimes, I'm waiting for that. Did I have a boy or a girl? Whatever that might be. And you don't get that message. And that creates a lot of anxiety, right? Or, and then sometimes people would get like Dear John letters through a 38 word thing. And can be traumatic. So those were, fortunately for everyone, withheld until the very end. But sometimes if it was somebody that a parent was ill or dying, if we were in port or something like that, which was very, very rare, I can count on one hand how many times we had a port call, that certain circumstances to get that person off. But again, if that was a critical job and you can't get a replacement, it is what it is. So, but the process, I think, was very archaic. It's not like getting an email now And I'm sure that to some degree, those messages that were 38 words are still probably very regulated as far as their length and what you could say. They're probably emailed, transmitted, and then radio transmitted so that you could probably get them through a sub. And they have internet capability and stuff like that, but I don't know what it is like now.
Yeah, now I'm kind of intrigued to see how it is now.
Yeah,
because you're just tying in, like when you're talking about the depth and everything, and the submarine. What's the submarine movie with Denzel Washington?
Crimson Tide.
Crimson Tide. Yeah, remember that was a big thing. We were trying to get the message, get to the right depth now. But I mean, and it's not funny, but it's a serious. I mean, that's a pretty serious thing that was going on. That I mean, and another stressful thing, not only to be in the tube, in the water, in the middle of the water, but the ability to communicate. To the outside, or even to get important stuff down here, like you said, it's just a constant state of hypervigilance and also like worrying. Like I could imagine being like to find out you had a kid like and really that happened a week ago and not be able to be there and not be able to even know that it's happened. So
I mean, that didn't happen to me, but
but it's happened to someone. It's an interesting thing, like you said before. It's a real mission. Like at the time, the submarine thing was a big deal when you guys were going out. It wasn't just training exercise. It was like legitimately deterrent for
nuclear war, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's one of those things we forget about over time. Yeah. That's no big deal. Yeah. So before we get into the next part of your career, you love movies, obviously. So
I guess. Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think all the things when I heard you talk about movies, you talk about how you said it is like it's the hero's journey. A lot of the movies you talk about, the Rocky hero's journey. Yeah. Top Gun, Hero's Journey, all the good movies have that. Like people look up the hero's journey and you'll figure it out and just watch it that way. Every good movie has that, right? And our generation, the 80 movies, they all were great like that, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was even the bad guys. Like a lot of times, the bad guys became good guys. You know what I mean? Eventually,
something if they had a redemption arc.
It's always the hero's journey. So we're gonna go on movies now. So as a Submariner, best submarine movie and why?
Oh my goodness. So I have two, and for probably distinct differences. I loved Crimson Tide. I mean, the original one that I saw was Hunt for October with Sean Connery. Had a great cast, and I was entering. I had finished sub school. I was in my A school and C school in Virginia, and I remember that came out, Hunt for October, and Navy military town. You couldn't go to a movie theater and that not be the line be circled around. Like people don't see that now. Just like Star Wars back in the day, you would have lines of people just circling around, waiting hours. And, I don't know if they offered like free tickets to military at that point. Like maybe they might for promotional reasons for now and stuff like that. So you were waiting and you were hoping to get a ticket. It wasn't like you got online and made reservations for your seat and got a guaranteed ticket. You didn't know if you were gonna have a ticket by the time you got up there. And sometimes you'd wait a couple of days and they'd have to shut off and say, we're sold out for all our shows. Yeah. So that was probably outside of Top Gun having some influence on me, submarines, that one I think really got me excited to why and what I was doing as a submariner. But I think context wise, and that was really neat. And I love the characters in that and the storyline, Tom Clancy, you can't go wrong. Yeah. But then we got to years later, Crimson Tide. And here I am now finishing up probably my submarine career, getting into the Navy nursing aspect of it. And then I think I had met my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. And that was one of the movies that I shared with her was Crimson Tide. I'm like, she won't probably appreciate the Hunt for October, but I introduced her to that. And I said, this is some of the things, and I'll point them out to you. There's like, that job is kind of what I did. And I never thought about how other people perceived us to an extent until I saw the response in at that time, my girlfriend, my wife, her eyes, and she started crying at the completion of Crimson Tide. And I was like, I really liked the movie, but I think the impact of the public's perception of maybe what submariners do on a daily basis. And I'm not saying all that stuff is all true or whatever. But it's a great story and the drama that was involved with it. But she was crying because I pointed out to her, I said, so the missile technician supervisor, if you recall that movie where the CO was really kind of prove his point. I'm not going to say who was right or wrong in that movie, but he has a weapon drawn to a person who had some sort of capability in launching nuclear weapons, and he's threatening his reps to do the right thing or his orders by doing this. And I told my wife, I said, that particular job, that MCC supervisor, was one of the roles that myself or my colleagues would have occupied at the time. So if we were crimson tiding, like the movie, that would have been me. And I don't know if that like scared her, impressed her, or whatever. Again, I was trying to date her at the time, but she started crying, and she's just like, so like this stuff happens. I'm like, well, it didn't happen on my ship.
I hope to God,
right? It didn't happen on any of our ships that we had, but the environment. So at the very beginning of the movie, you're seeing people drill for fire, and then real fires occur. There's a loss of life. What do you do with that loss of life? The persons end up being processed, and they got to be kept somewhere. So where do you keep somebody cold? Right? Probably. It sounds very callous, but a refrigerator or a freezer or something like that. And they didn't show all that stuff, but it's, but the job still has to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think in that separation from family and friends that you did get to see kind of at the beginning as these sailors were leaving their family members, I think that was outside of the overall drama. I think that's something that resonated with her. And it still resonates with me today, but that's probably one of my favorite movies. Now, U-571 with Matthew McConaughey, that movie was I don't want to say a reboot from a previous one, but it was powerful because there was a lot of silence in the movie from the crew, because they were trying to survive an attack. And there was some espionage stuff going on too, like classified operations going on and getting certain stuff. But that was a movie that I probably felt like I was white knuckling my chair, so to speak. And she saw that with me too. And I think my wife at the time, that was something that was just kind of powerful too. It helped to have Bon Jovi and in the movie too. I'm sure she didn't mind that, but it was a very powerful movie. And that's an old style submarine. It was during, an old period of pre-Cold War, you want to call it that, right? But the stress that the submariners went through, and then you as the observer watching, I think that's very powerful for understanding like what it takes to be psychologically able to function in that space, let alone the stress that might be endured for anything that might occur.
You hit all my favorite things except for one.
Oh boy,
Das Boot.
Oh yes. Yeah, that's, and I kind of
feel like
that's a classic. That is a classic.
And
it's very dark and quiet. And that's why I think I like the U-571, because I think it captures a lot of that.
Yeah. A little bit more. Yeah. I mean, I think the Das Boot has more, it's not a good story, right? It's just the perils of like, the history of the submariners during the World War II, takes on, the role of the Germans, but it's the same thing I'm sure for the Allied submariners as well. But yeah, all good. But that's because there's four good ones. I mean, those are all like all those movies. It's me though, if they come on, I'm watching them all.
Yeah, I get sucked up into them. Yeah. But I did. I know before leaving for boot camp as an enlisted person, knowing that I was going to get into subs, I know I didn't watch that movie, which is probably a good thing because I would have been probably stressed out. But I did see a movie with I think it was called The Abyss. Had nothing to do with the military, but it was underwater kind of things like that and what occurs. And I was like, this is a little stressful going into boot camp. And then full Metal Jacket. I think I saw like 2 days before going to boot camp. And I'm like, why? Great acting, great depiction of what people might have gone through during that time frame. And then the boot camp scenario, but that was probably a little pre-traumatizing leading into military service. But I think it kept me honest. It kept me working hard. I was scared. I didn't want to mess up.
You're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I hope I did not sign up for that.
Yeah.
So before we get into the next phase, are you ready for pour?
Sure.
I got your favorite.
Oh boy.
You said for you. Chai had said his favorite was Elijah Craig 18. So we have Elijah Craig 18. How's that sound?
Yeah, it sounds fantastic.
I'm not partaking. I'm going 90 Day Chai, but you go ahead and help you.
Sure,
but we've actually talked about Elijah Craig 18, but that's your favorite. I thought we'd feature again. So this product comes from Heaven Hill. It's a Heaven Hill product. And we've talked a lot about Heaven Hill and all that stuff. They're actually the only private American family-owned and operated distillery. It was founded in 1935 and is located in Bardstown, Kentucky. great place. It's changed over the past few years. It's beautiful. Have you been to the distillery? Have you?
I have.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to do a full tour because I think they were done for that day, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, they changed it up. Great tours. But like I said before, I've talked about this before. It's the 7th largest alcohol supplier in the U.S. and the 2nd largest holder of bourbon whiskey inventory in the world. Like I said, it's independently family owned and operated. And produces some pretty well-known products that most people know if you're into bourbon and whiskey. Brands like Heaven Hill, Evan Williams, Elijah Craig, Old Fitzgerald, Larceny, Henry McKenna, to go on, and many of those have received a ton of awards. But Elijah Craig 18 was first released in 1994.
Wow.
So kind of an interesting one. That's why I picked it with your date. We'll talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It is one of the, at the time, was one of the oldest single barrel bourbons that were available. From 2012 to 2014, it was not released because of a shortage of barrels. There's a big fire around that time, or before that, which caused a big shortage. And in 2015, Elijah Craig 18 made its re-release. And it's been going ever since. They've been releasing it back since 2015. The bottle still remains one of the probably most sought after bottles in the market for people. People love it or hate it. It's a little lower proof for me, so it's not one of my favorites. But at the time, when I remember when I was first getting into that lower proof, it was one of the things I really enjoyed. But again, this is Elijah Craig 18. It's 18 years old, 90 proof, and it is mash bill is 78% corn, 12% malted barley, and 10% rye. So enjoy. And awesome. You said this was a very special bottle for you. So
I had the. You want me to pour it? I don't know. Might get a straw.
Hope so.
I will try to not make a mess. Very nice. Let's see if I can.
And I'm going to do pretty well because it's, I love Elijah Craig 18, but when we get to later on, when we do the Four Roses, I'll probably be regretting my decision not to drink for 90 days.
Yeah, I just, and I guess it's special to me. I got into probably bourbon tasting and appreciation of it all from my brother and his wife, who, my brother Ty, he's about 15 and a half years younger than me. So my mom would call us bookends. I'm the older model. He's the younger and last model. But he and his wife, Mallory, had done the bourbon trail. And my wife and I and our family were probably like, I don't know, I think we were stationed in Virginia at the time. And he'd mentioned to me and I was kind of like, oh, that's cool. That's neat. And I really hadn't really tasted anything. And then we get to years later, we ended up going to be stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. St. Augustine is where we lived. And my brother and his wife were kind of sharing with me like some of the bourbons that they actually really liked. And then I made sure that I had a bottle when they visited. And the first bottle, and I know this is an Elijah Craig, I'll get to that, was the Four Roses Small Batch Select. And it was really nice. I could taste the things that they were describing and then some, and really, really nice. And so that's kind of my entry into all this. And that's why that particular bourbon, the Four Roses Small Batch Select, is always one that is, it doesn't matter what mood I'm in, where I'm at, what I'm eating, whatnot. That's like one that would just go perfect with anything. Now, the Elijah Craig 18 became very special because in their description of their bourbon trail visits, they had visited the Heaven Hill distillery, and he had mentioned the certain bourbons. And I think he had either got a bottle of that or something very similar to it. And he was telling me about it, and I had never tried it or anything like that. And I think it was like years later, after I'd already tried and sampled various bourbons and whiskeys out there, that we ended up being invited to, I had retired, and he invited us to Delaware, in the downtown Delaware area. And he invited me to OPA, where I met you.
OPA, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, never heard of it. Yeah. And we had tried a couple things, and we had tried, I think, a town in, I want to say Town and Country. That's a mall. Was it Town and Branch? Is it Town Branch? I can't remember. Branch, yeah. So we tried that, and it was really good. And then we moved up to, I think you might have mentioned the Elijah Craig, and then he got excited. I saw the excitement in his eyes. I'm like, you know what? We're here with our families. They're kind of doing some things. We had some food, and tried the Elijah Craig, and we both looked at each other, and he already knew that it was going to be good. And I was like, this is really good. Like, what is this again? What is, it was very smooth. It was very warm and inviting. it is a lower proof, and maybe that's from what we had before leading up to the point. It just hit the right point. So that was a memory that I shared with my brother that I felt like was very special. And so I worked very, very hard after that experience trying to locate a bottle. And like you mentioned, and I didn't know back then, I'm like, I'll be able to find one. Can't find it anywhere. Even when you get these allocated invites and little notifications everywhere, by the time you get there, it's gone, if they even have it. But this, and I've gotten other bottles of other things, but this one eluded me until I think right before, was it Thanksgiving. And I ended up was conversing with somebody waiting in line for allocated stuff, and the person said, I have that, like I have, and would you mind me gifting it to you? And I was like, right before Thanksgiving. So I was able to then have a gifted bottle, and I brought it home to Thanksgiving, and we were having our family come, and my brother was there, and I was able to have that full circle kind of moment with him, and downstairs, and having that in our bar area. So it's very special for me for probably that reason. Outside of the experience, I think it does have just a great profile. It's just so nice. It's so smooth. It's so nice. Yeah. I taste the flavors. But yeah, I'm looking at this bottle, and I'm reflecting on my bottle at home. I probably have about the same amount. I'm like, how am I going to stretch this out? Because I know it'll be a long time before I can get my hands on another bottle.
I love you. This is what your just description. If you're not a whiskey person, that you're probably not going to understand where Child's going with that. It's just funny to hear you and to see your enthusiasm, because the big thing to me is that's what it is. It's like, it's something with a member. Like, people always ask, like, my favorite, like, what's my favorite pour, and a lot of it is like, you try to articulate if they're not into it. It's like, a lot of it is, it's like, I'm not even like drinking right now, and I'm super excited that you're having
I'm sorry.
It's honestly, it's what I like about it. That's why, it's really, there's a part of like the enjoyment of other people really enjoying the experience and have a story to it. There's nothing better than to have a pour with someone. People, if you don't understand, that's what I think, I'll get rackety and talk about where the bourbon community is now. They're missing that. They're missing how it used to be, like building memories with people, just, sharing things. And in the community, that it really is like that is like, hey, you have this, you've never had this, or, and how the community will be like, okay, it comes around. Like, I'll get you that. It's so crazy to see those, because, if that's ever happened to you, you need to get some better bourbon friends, because it happens all the time. It's so it's humbling, it's exciting, and it's a fun thing to hear, especially that if you enjoy something, how the community is like, okay, here you go, try it, or here's a bottle, I'll take it for you. But because there's a lot of people like, yeah, I'll give you Elijah Craig 18, but it's going to cost you $250.
And in that day at OPA, when we tried the Elijah Craig, it was worth every penny that it was. We had such a good time. Like, oh, you know what? And I was looking around, and I'm like, wait, you have Pappy, you have this, you have that. I mean, you have everything. And I'm like, maybe we should try that, because when are we going to be in the area that we would be able to try that? And my brother's like, are you sure? Are you sure? I'm like, let's go ahead and do that. Yeah. And it was good. It was good. And it was very measured out. Everybody, anywhere you go, they measure it out. And so that's kind of like, oh, this is kind of weird. They're measuring it as like a chemistry test or something, a lab. And we drank that. And before you could even probably perceive or sense that spirit, and you're trying to grasp onto like, what am I tasting? And it's gone. and it was good. It was very good. I'm not, obviously it's popular for a reason, and the demand and things like that. But when we came back down to it, we centered in on this Elijah Craig 18, and I'm like, oh, that's it. And we had a great experience, and I was lucky enough to get like a bottle afterwards, and I'd say probably a year or two afterwards, leading up to the holiday, and put a dent into it and stuff like that. But I'm like, no, trying to see how I can stretch it out and it be part of memories as opposed to any other bourbon. But I will say, like the Four Roses, you might be getting into that, or maybe not, because we have it there. That's the one that probably introduced me to this whole thing. So my wife is like, you got too much stuff. You got bottles and bottles and bottles.
There's never too much.
And my son who's 23, he's like me, wanting to kind of taste and have this palate for these things and experience. And it doesn't have to be the high end bourbons. It doesn't have to be it just, what hits and resonates with you at the time and what's going through your life and things like that. But when I introduced him and shared him the story about, and he shared with us with the Elijah Craig, but the Four Roses small batch select, he was like, oh, I get it. Like, this is really good. Like, it hits everything. It's a little spicy. It's sweet. It's caramely. It's viscous. It coats your palate really well, and it leaves you with something afterwards that you can kind of analyze if that's what you want to do. But then there's some that are high end, and you taste it, and it's like, what am I tasting? You know? Yeah. So, but I think it has to do with how it resonates with you and enjoy talking. And the fact that you're able to couple these discussions about military life and things leading up to this and sharing, you know, the experiences with bourbon, I think is a just really fun thing.
Yeah. So your oldest son is drinking bourbon then. I'm trying.
Yeah. He's now experiencing dry January as well as my wife. So
yeah, see, I'm at the dilemma. Like, it's one of the funny things is I had this like expectation that I was hoping that 24, 22, and 20, about to be 20. So it's like the expectation that they're like so far, none of them, like I've tried it all different ways. And it's an interesting thing, because I was like, I had in my mind, I have a couple bottles that I was like, oh, it'd be fun to have that with them. And now it's more of like, I've accumulated a lot over time. So it's like, I thought they'd be a special event. So, but they still aren't important. Like I have, like, when you talk about your favorite bottle, like people always ask me this, I have a favorite bottle. It was my first, I have another bottle now, but it was the first, big time bottle I had, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I haven't had it in like probably 3 years, but I wonder if I still enjoy it, the taste, or more that it's a story of what, my first thing. And either way, it's good for me. It's one of those things that I like. It's like, but that's the thing about the bourbon culture. If you're into it, people like it for different reasons. A lot of them,
Yeah. And the fact that it's a social thing to where, someone comes to your house, you're like, have you tried this? And maybe they haven't tried any bourbon at all, or maybe they have, and they're like, oh, I don't know. Then you introduce them to something, high end, low end, doesn't matter. And they're going to remember that time and you introducing them to it. And that becomes kind of a positive, hopefully positive moment. Not that it has to be a big, huge milestone, but when you're talking about these, what's your connection to that specific bourbon? And I'm sure there's better bourbons out there. I'm sure I'll have other memories with other things, but that's like one that I've tied to the experience that I share with my brother. And, I have another brother too, and he's not a bourbon person. And I have special memories with him as well. But this is something
they're not as good as the bourbon ones.
No. But this is something specific that I have with my youngest brother. And again, now it's led to me having that connection, a different connection and appreciation for something common with my son. Yeah. So what my wife, she'll drink a bourbon drink and she'll appreciate certain aspects of it. She's not one to gravitate towards that on any given moment. It would have to be something, if we're in bourbon country, then it makes sense, right? You're doing that, but usually she's more or less having a wine or something like that. But yeah, so this is always
because I think bourbon has brought me together. So some of my closest friends that are in my life right now was because it's one of those weird things, as you talk about, veteran mental health and the problems with alcohol and that a lot of us have. It's kind of those weird things, but it is there's some positive in that. For me, it's been in my life. There's a lot of people that I don't think I would have met if it wasn't for that. A shared common love for the brown juice. It's always fun. But I still have dreams that one of my sons they're gonna get into it. Maybe not. It's okay.
Yeah.
My oldest son's in IPA, so I'm happy about that.
And I like that too. But my son, he likes certain beers. He's more of a Guinness kind of person, but he's not into the IPAs. Whereas my brother, my youngest brother, we will try all kinds of different beers and appreciate them. And I certainly like the IPAs and things like that. My wife doesn't care for the IPAs, but she likes a good beer, a wheat beer, so it's kind of nice. And, you mentioned the fact that, it could be stereotypical with people that are in service or veterans or good or bad times with alcohol and use and misuse and abuse and things like that, and how kind of and it can. It's not to say that it doesn't or it won't, but it's something that I'm pretty cognizant of as well. I mean, just because you live a good life and you've made it through adversity and things like that, there are folks that do suffer within the family and friends network that do suffer with it. Maybe it's not high end bourbon, maybe it's beer or whatever, but it might be some sort of substance abuse or addiction type of thing like that. So I want to be real sensitive to that and want to stress the importance of being responsible, but also acknowledge the fact that there are people that are suffering and families that suffers directly or indirectly as a result of that. And it's important to kind of talk those things over. And I'm real sensitive. I have people in my family that have struggled with alcoholism and they have recovered. Right. But I'm sensitive to where I'm even having family gatherings. I'm not, other people might feel comfortable with having a drink or two to celebrate the moment. And then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, for whatever reason, I will not, and it's not like I'm hiding my own alcohol, but I will not have like an alcoholic drink in front of them and be drinking and having a great time. I can show them, I can have a great time in solidarity with them as they continue. And maybe it's not a big deal for them anymore. Right. And sometimes you joke, hey, is that vodka or is that water? You try to do that, but it can be a very sensitive and there are more families that are probably afflicted with the alcohol misuse and abuse and might maybe lead to other substances and things like that and other family dynamics. So, this is a great, I think your format here is a safe place. It's of respect. It's a format that allows us to kind of have some commonalities outside of our military service and things and still focus on
it ties into the community too. Like we've had plenty of guests that they don't drink and I'm okay with that. I'm a little bit different with you now. I'll usually ask the person if they're okay with it. If they're okay with it, I feel like I don't have to be, I have my own problems, no one needs to be in solidarity with my problems or things like that. So it is an interesting thing, but yeah, it definitely is one of the things that as long as, I do like the dry January. I like when people, for me, the 90 days people ask me what I do, and it's because I'm hoping to drop about 15 pounds because when I drink, I eat horrible things. So I started eating a bag of chips and a bowl of chips turned into a bag of chips. And so
we all, I probably need not a dry January speak, but some sort of food equivalent to that with activity throughout the year. That would be the thing I need to do. So, I mean, there's always room for improvement for everybody. And I applaud you for doing that. My wife is doing dry January. My son is doing dry January. And I'm not trying to tempt them or anything like that, or tempt you with this and the descriptions, but
I'm tempted. Don't worry. Like I'm always tempted.
I will say, since they're doing that, like my son and I aren't having, our every so often nightly cap and talk about our day. We still talk about our day, but like we won't have that. And what I've noticed is that maybe I'm only having a drink on the weekend or something like that, like one. So there's residual benefits to not only saving your Elijah Craig 18 bottle from depleting any time quicker, but you do probably your impact of you going dry January probably has other impacts with your family members, interactions and stuff.
I think my wife was supposed to be dry too. She wasn't. Nobody else is on my solid age. It's for me. So I'm not, if it has residual effects, I'm okay with it. But I do have a tip for you to keep your bottle short. Put all your good bottles that you really like in the back of as far that you have to dig through. That's my technique. So that way I have that as if I'm having a few drinks, that way I got, your first drink of the night, you're digging through there. You don't mind moving bottles. It's in the back. You get to it, put it back. But then like later in the day, if if you had a few, you're like, I don't want to dig through that. Then you just have something in the front. That's a good way to put your good bottles in the front. That's a tip from Che. It works.
Che to Chai. Yeah, that's a good tip. I had for Thanksgiving, I was sharing this out with folks, and I asked them, hey, would you like it? I'll try what you're having. Okay. And that's why I was kind of like, when I pour, I'll just be very conservative. And the young man poured and he poured and he poured and he poured. And I'm like, that's got to last a little while. But hey, I want you to enjoy it. But yeah, so that was something I learned really quickly. Like maybe if I strategically place this bottle in the back of the other bottles, it'll be fine. But that's Well,
it's always fun. Like it's funny you said before, and this is most we've talked about bourbon in a while, which is kind of funny on the podcast. But it's always interesting when you said like when people come over, it's like if I know you appreciate bourbon, then I'm gonna like. The sky's the limit. There's a lot of things we'll do. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. If you don't know anything about bourbon, you are not getting good stuff because you see people that just that there's nothing more painful than there's something that you like, you really enjoy it. You want to share with somebody, but they're just drinking to drink it. And they're not getting the same thing. You're just like the whole time you're watching. I had my middle son graduated in last May and, I brought a couple bottles. So we had a big Airbnb together and I brought a couple bottles. And one of these bottles, I literally had like, I opened it like 5 years earlier, and it was like one of my favorite Elijah Craig private barrel picks, an older one that they don't, they generally don't release anymore. And I'm like, I get it out to, and I'm just like, oh, everybody will enjoy this. And literally like an hour later, it's like gone. And I look over and my brother-in-law's got like a big old, he's like, what, we're supposed to drink? And they are, but it's like, if you're some of those things, if it's something you like, I'm not going to lie. I have some things that I really enjoy. Their background that I got to consciously get it. No one's going to, if I say go get something, they're not randomly going to grab that. And that's why I'm also glad that my wife is not into bourbon, because that would be like a nightmare to come down and be like, where's this bottle? And have them be like, oh, I made it into, you hear those stories like, I made it into this, or I just drank it. And I'm like, I'd be like, so
yeah, my wife, she'll appreciate certain things, and some things will be too strong or whatnot, regardless of the proof. And if it's something that's mixed, she probably has a better appreciation for it. But something straight and neat, it's probably too much for her. She loves wine, but she loves wine with like a little bit of smokiness, or she likes her reds and cabs. She loves the Snoop Dogg.
Really?
The Cali red wine or whatever, and it's got like a bourbon barrel kind of finish to it. It is very nice. But so she does appreciate that smokiness to it. I think it adds to the flavor profile. But yeah, she's not like one to go, hey, let me go downstairs and see what bourbon I can get into. Yeah,
I hear the bourbon, when they have the bourbon couples, I'm like, oh, how does that work? I'd have to have a lock on it to make sure my wife didn't get anything that I wanted. But let's get back on track to you. Yeah. We'll have another break to bourbon here.
All right.
But so, now you decided you found your next stage in life. So by this time you're enlisted, you're looking up the possibility to become an officer. So you find the naval route to become a nurse and get your education.
Yep. There was an opportunity where there was, like I mentioned, the Naval ROTC Officer Training Scholarship. And the specific one was for Nurse Corps. So I was like, this is a perfect fit. Let me take some college courses ahead of time to get some prereqs out of the way. Let me do well enough on the ACT and SAT. I hated those tests, still don't love them. I understand why they're there. But I wasn't a great test taker, a lot of anxieties as a person, regardless of the military service and things like that, to take those types of tests. It probably stemmed from having to put my last name in the bubbles, or at an early age for your standardized test. So I'm sure that was traumatizing to an extent. So taking SAT was always never fun. And I think because it wasn't fun, it reflected in the scores that I got. So then I finally was able to take it through the Navy. They had a program where they would basically fund your ACT, SAT, like 1 or 2 a year or something like that, if I remember correctly. So you take the free ones, and then you'd pay out of your pocket to do better the next time. Well, I finally made the cut to be to meet the requirements to be able to apply for a scholarship, and I was able to do that, and I got in, and it was fantastic. I had one school that I applied to, all kinds of schools that were wanting your monies, basically government money for the scholarships. And for me, it was a gamble. I think about it now, it's like, what was I thinking? I applied for one school, and it was Ohio State. I went to Ohio State, and a very great place to be. The education program that I participated in, nursing, was very, very competitive. I mean, so competitive. The GPAs were high, and I was like, I don't have those kind of GPA. Do I have it to even get through this? And it just worked out, and was able to get through the program. And as I was going through the program, I met my wife, along with other friends, but met my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife then. She was my girlfriend at the time, became my girlfriend, fiance, and then my wife. And I think had my life story not taken me through how it did, leading me from enlisted to the scholarship to nursing to Ohio State of all places, I would have never probably connected with her, and we wouldn't have, the family that we have today and things like that. So I know people have dealt with all kinds of tragedies and challenges and things like that within their military career and personal lives. And we all have that to an extent. I feel very fortunate to have been proactive in my career, but the way things have led me in part of my story, and now my family's story, to where we are right now, it's been a blessing. And Ohio State was a great school. Like, if anybody ever wants to go to nursing school or any kind of school, Ohio State, if anybody wants to be a nurse in general, I think that's or healthcare profession, I think that's very commendable. I think I think there needs to be more aid and support for those folks that want to do that. The demand is certainly there. And I think since COVID and things like that, I think a lot of the programs and a lot of institutions are offering incentives for people to do that people might not be aware of and things like that. So from there, my wife and I graduated from Ohio State. She was like,
let's go back to leaving the Navy as an enlisted guy going, you're entering Ohio State, a little bit older than everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And coming off of, where you weren't having a stellar, as a young guy, weren't having a stellar academic career. Like what did you attribute to being, when you went from, your senior year, just only 4 years earlier of high school, where you're struggling, barely getting by, to being able to, you secure a scholarship and Chai's playing like really, I don't know if it's like playing out, but it's a big deal. These scholarships you're talking about, full ride. I think, I don't know if it's gotten harder now, but to get a full ride and especially for like the nursing, it was a big deal. They weren't just handing those out to people.
No, they're not.
So what do you think changed between you and that 4 years? If someone's listening, because a lot of people will be like, they don't understand. A lot of people go to the military that, for that first enlistment, and they're a train wreck, or they may have it together, and then all of a sudden, you hear the stories all the time about 4 years later, they're a different person. What changed in you that went from, barely making it out of Gahanna High School, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
To, being in the nursing program at the Ohio State.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask anybody when I was in high school, including teachers and fellow students, they probably thought I was a decent student. And for the most part, I think I was to a certain degree. And then it just all of a sudden, I just kind of like couldn't balance things out. I remember going to a 10-year reunion or something like that, or 20-year reunion, and ran into people, and they're like, "What do you mean you barely like graduated high school? You're like one of the smart ones." I'm like, smart enough to know better, but wasn't performing as such. So I think part of that realization was maybe, and I alluded to this in the beginning, like maybe where you feel like you're trying to escape the setting or your previous history of whatever you were doing or experiencing, to do something new and make it out on your own. So I think that part of it had a lot to do with it. I think once I got into the military service and exploring all these opportunities that were out there, and they're not going to tell you, hey, there's this. And back in the day, things weren't always cataloged in internets and repositories and marketed as such. They came in instructions. In paper, and some of those things were outdated, some things weren't, but you had to go track these down. So you had to, well, how do I do that? You would ask your leadership. Well, I don't know, but whatever you want to do, I'll support you. So that's always nice to hear. But then you have to go, and you're on a submarine. So sometimes you're not even on land to even look up these things in person. So you spend a lot of time kind of Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, kind of Inspector Gadget, kind of tracking these things down. Yeah. So I think that inquisitiveness and the eye of the tiger, I think it had to do with a lot of that. I think the aspect of whether or not that's going to become a reality, because a lot of it does fall on the individual. A lot of it has to do with the support that you have. Now, I had sailor colleagues that were with me that were like, "Oh, you just want to be a pretty boy. You just want to do this." And then I had ones that were like, "Good for you. Go for it. Blah, blah, blah. We'll support you." And they might joke with you and kind of stir the pot here and there. But I think when it comes down to it, and those are your brothers, so to speak. So you get that. You get that in your own home. I think the leadership really makes a difference. And that's what helps to make it a reality, or lead you, or really kind of make things and connect you to those resources and make them really a reality. I had great leaders. They didn't always know what it was, because they themselves didn't pursue that. And I never really put that pressure on them, like, "Oh, you should know, you're the chief." But I had very supportive chiefs and leading petty officers. And one, I know he's on Facebook. I'm not sure if he's joining us right now, but David Batchelder was fantastic, is fantastic. He's still with us. But he's the chief's chief and chief petty officer, administrator, however you want to look, leader. And he was one of us, had gone through everything we had gone through, but now he's in a leadership position. And again, he may not have known at the time what to do, but he was there for support. You knew he had your back. And I think that makes a great difference in whether or not someone who has the initiative and has the drive, but maybe doesn't know everything at that point, which they wouldn't, can really see their dreams through and see the possibilities and know that they have that support. And it has a huge effect while you are going through that process. But then years later, once you've benefited by having gone through the process and benefited from the education, and now you're in leadership roles. So now I'm the officer, the junior officer. I'm like hungry. I'm like, what can I do for the young enlisted folks that are out there? What can I do for the junior officers? And then meanwhile, there's still opportunities for me to advance my education, to make me competitive and things like that. So I looked out for those for me, but I always, because of that chief, because of those leading petty officers, and because of the dynamics that I had within my initial division of being a missile technician or FTB on my submarine, that really kind of set things in motion as to what the possibilities were, and then how I chose to make them part of my my actions, my leadership, and what I could do for people. And then there's the aspect of the hero stuff with the movies. There's the aspect of caring and being compassionate for somebody, and really engaging and hearing what they have to do. And I think that coincides with also being, a good nurse, a good healthcare provider, and things like that. So I think there's more impacts than just the individual that is really hungry and wants to, and I would love to say it was all me. And I feel like, there was a lot of work on me, but if I didn't have that, my path might've been a little different, in the adversity.
I think, our time, it's like, I still hope it's that way. There's good leaders and bad leaders. Like, the bad leaders that were, were always, or the bad leaders, weren't really helping you because they were sometimes worried about, losing somebody that they thought was, that they needed in their unit or whatever. But then you always had the thing is, the military definitely has its share of, if that plan like you're going on. I think it's really hard for people to see, like, you're an enlisted guy talking about going to college, and there's a lot of negative reinforcement of how crazy you are, and like you said, that so there's a lot that you have to work through, that individual person, but that organization does promote that. There's so many good leaders that, like, they see that you do that. There's a lot of people that are behind it, and the system's behind you too. There's a lot of opportunities if you're out there, you're searching, you're looking to better yourself. Not that necessarily, it's not, I don't know if bettering is right, but to have a different career path, right? Yeah. That's the one thing about the military people forget. I mean, you can go in and you hear stories like your story all the time. It's an amazing story. Like, to me, it's a different, when you see people do that, it really is. But it's a possibility, like it was in 1994. It's a possibility like it is today. And the one thing I do tell people when it comes to the military is, if you don't know, and if you're a parent and your kid doesn't know, the military is a great thing for them to go and grow up and learn something and figure it out.
Yeah, it is.
They don't know. And it has a lot of really good benefits. Like, all of a sudden, you're getting paid, it's a career that, nobody's getting laid off per se anymore, but and you learn the skill, but you're growing up, and then you're really, what's 2 years, 4 years, like, think about 4 years from 18 to 22, you're a lot better, focused. You've learned a lot more about yourself. You've learned from other people to go in and be successful. And you hear stories like yours all the time of guys and gals that enlisted and, weren't, had all the potential, but weren't really,
and I think
weren't doing, I don't say, like, sometimes it was on purpose, but other times just because of, life on life terms. But all of a sudden, the military can provide that, and it's an amazing thing. And I'm glad you were able to take.
It's been really good for me, and I don't know what my life would have been, and my wife wouldn't have been there had I not been a part of that and seeing it through for a career. I think during my ROTC years, my very first year, it was the spring, so I started in 94, 95. I don't know if you're familiar, but you might be, with Admiral Borda. He was the chief of naval operations. He was the very first enlisted from E1 to go to be chief of naval operations, and I think even chief joint staff. So he was a fantastic template. He's no longer with us, obviously, due to there was reports of suicide and things like that afterwards and stuff like that. So there was a lot of things that fed into that. But what I gleaned from him and and I met him in person at our passing review in the spring. And I was very eager to meet him when I heard that he was an enlisted person, and then assumed the highest position in the military, at least for the Navy. And I met him, and he was larger than life, that I thought. And I meet him, and the man is my height. We are looking directly eye to eye. He's 5'4", I'm 5'4", and I'm like looking at him and I'm seeing even more possibilities that I could have ever imagined. And not to say that I ever had any goals of being a nurse corps officer who then would become chief of naval operations, but just knowing that someone before me had worked very, very hard, and probably in some similar paths had people that were supportive, and he was very resourceful in looking at opportunities for himself, but then opportunities for everyone else that he probably grew along the way. I found very, very impactful to me as a person, but then as a person who became a leader within the military and making a career. And it still has impacts on me. I'm always looking for opportunities for folks, even at the VA where I work currently now, just looking out for people and seeing if there's education opportunities or any opportunities, even if it means that they have to leave you. And that's the hardest thing. And the other perspective is having children of your own. You know, you don't want them to leave, but you want them to be able to leave and then one day be able to have success and joys outside of you, so that you've prepared them for those types of things in life. And so he taught me something that I wasn't necessarily looking forward to be taught at that time, just with that that very small interaction in the spring. I think it was probably May of '95. I'll never forget it. So
yeah, and I think in the military, it's one of those organizations too where you do see that. You see people to have what you want, right? And if you talk to them or just watch, there's a path to a lot of that stuff where it was, you know, getting to units, getting, you know, what is important to you, getting certain badges or, you know, or career. So it is always great to see that in the military, the path is there. If you want it, there's a lot, you know, believe me, there's a path you don't want to go down, but there is some paths that you can follow. And it's, you know, I owe a lot of my growing up to that organization of, you know, where I was at, and my success later on in life was, you know, down to those years I was in the military. And I think a lot of people, there's just a lot, you know, it's very impactful to see people that are just like you and have the same story, and like, oh gosh, how do I get what that person has and do that? And, you know, a lot, you know, not that it's just that easy. Sometimes when you see that path, you still got to, you know, the personal sacrifice and the personal work, but it's super rewarding, and it's great to see someone like you. So, and that's what I love about the military. There's someone just like you. There's a lot. You're all very similar. Yeah, more similar than you're not.
Well, yeah, and I think probably as people in general, whether you're the military service or not, I think we're probably more alike, that we know, and we go through triumphs and we go through challenges that we share or don't share. But there's some common things that are, like I mentioned, there's alcoholism in my family. There's all kinds of mental health stuff that has occurred, and there's been a lot of joy and success and education and milestones and career success and things like that. And it's been very good. I think what, I guess, I don't know if when I was talking to Admiral Vorachai back then, and he wasn't necessarily a celebrity, but kind of, you know, I think having a conversation with him, and I know, and I asked him, like, what do I need to do to go from here to here, or what should I focus on? Just like little, and he was very nice and took the time. And I think when you have that conversation, that face to face, even if it's for moments, it can have huge impacts, and it makes it the possibilities, the potential for it to be real. And I think, you know, like when you're watching celebrities and stuff like that on TV or social media, it's like you're very much removed for them. And we're all human beings. There's so many more common things that we have that make us more alike than we are different. And I think, you know, that was a perfect example that still has meaning and impact on my life now. Am I going to make mistakes? Am I going to do whatever? Sure. You know, and I'm going to have things that I can or can't cope with or deal with, maybe not in the best way. Sure. But it's moments like that that I really cherish in the military that I would have otherwise had, you know, and I started from being on that submarine, you know, who'd have thought?
Well, you couldn't go anywhere. That's another thing too. It's like, that's another thing I think that you learn a lot about where you find the slummers, because it's not like an everyday world, you know, world where somebody irritated you could just say, I'm leaving. Yeah. You could leave the room, but like, you know, 40 minutes later, you're back, but you have to be back with that person. So, you know, I credit, you know, growing up at an organization helped me to deal with diverse people, different people. But a lot of it, we're all the same when it comes down to when you cut aside all the bullshit of what's going on, that you have so many similarities, and you're alike in so many ways. I think people forget that. I think the military brings that and all this. I think that's why those relationships are so genuine. And I think it's one of the things that when we get out, right, of the military, that we really miss, that we don't talk about. Like, there's not that openness of, you know, there's few organizations where you've like sat for hours and hours with somebody, you know, talking about, you know, your happiest moments, your sad moments, just bullshitting and just being with people, you know, and you know, that was for me one of the hard things when I left the military, is that camaraderie, that brotherhood that existed, you know, and you're looking at it and you want to connect with people on the outside, but you know, that's not always the case. You know, I mean, some people, it's, you know,
and you don't have to be, you know, you could be an introvert. You could be quite the opposite. You're very, very social, and but that need to be connected is still there. Maybe not always talking and being out there, but like having a sense of belonging, I think is important. And then the other aspect of that is the sense of feeling, you know, and with the military, you get a certain degree of respect, you know, from society as well as members within, based on your rank and this and the other. But really, when it comes down to it, regardless of rank, respect, we all as human beings want to feel valued. And sometimes we devaluate ourselves, or other people do that for us, and we buy into that. And I think that I think another source to the question that you'd asked before is like, how did you go from that to this? What was kind of the launching pad for that is really kind of understanding, you know, you can prepare for the worst types of things, but kind of really having a good grasp of your worth. And it starts with people supporting you. It starts with how you perceive yourself and things like that. And you don't have to be belligerent and so confident to where you're making other people feel like they're below you type of thing. Like I said, I think from me, and maybe I'm fortunate to have been enlisted in an officer, because I feel like I could go between everybody, you know. But when I reflect back to how things were in high school, I was friends with people that are jocks. I was friends with people that might have been perceived as being outcasts. And I felt like I'm okay with any of them and feel comfortable enough to talking with them or engaging with them, or maybe making them feel like, you know, I'm just as good as you, or vice versa. We're going to school together type of thing. And I don't know, that's kind of been my thing as going through the military career. And then even after retiring, there's that, but you know, that sense of belonging that came with the military after almost 30 years, that there was a piece that was missing once I transitioned into the private sector and retired. And a lot of people go through that transition, and how they deal with it. Everybody deals with it differently. Sometimes marriages are intact. Sometimes divorces occur. Sometimes deaths occur. All these different things. Sometimes you don't get the job that you want. Sometimes, you know, there's tragedies that occur. But you know, I have felt going through that, like I've always been connected to my family and the history of being with the military, but I didn't feel like I was maybe attached to them. I just saw a fox go across your backyard. It was so cool. Anyways, I just, yeah, I think just having that connection is important. And I think a lot of folks that have a sense of feeling lost, or like they're not important, or they're not valued. I think maybe some of those types of feelings are attached to not feeling like they belong, or being connected. And I've certainly, even though I've painted you a pretty nice picture of things working out and everything really well, you know, that went through my mind with that transition from the military to my private sector job in academia to now the job that I work with, the VA. I will say that I probably feel more connected to where I was connected in service, working with the veterans, or working with people that are veterans themselves, serving the veterans. So I feel like that connection, I feel more whole than ever. But, you know, knowing that can go up and down at times and stuff like that. It's just, you know, and taking the time. If you ask somebody how they're doing, and I tell this to my staff, I said, or anybody, we handle education at the VA, all the training of people coming in and get oriented. And I said, if you ask somebody how they're doing, you better make sure you have time, or make the time to listen. And that's sometimes hard. Sometimes we're like, yeah, how you doing? And if, you know, we're more likely to be programmed because we don't want to complain. We're like, oh, doing fine. It's great. I get a little cold. But if we really wanted to answer that question honestly, sometimes we want to, and maybe we feel like it's not the right place, and maybe it's not, right? Maybe there's a better time and place. But if we were really feeling open to saying something, we would hope that the person receiving that information is actually going to listen and engage with us. And maybe they would just listen, and that's all it is. Or maybe they would listen and go, you know what, let's take a walk over here and get you to this other person that can help out.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've had a big change in my life with. I mean, you and I were talking about this before we started the podcast. This is kind of the same topic, but yeah, I was guilty of. I've always asked people how they're doing, and a lot of it was I. If I'm being honest with you, 50% of the time I didn't care. I was just doing it to check the block. What you're supposed to do. The key to that now, especially when we're talking about, veteran suicide and when people are struggling and, is to be listening and to be sincere about what you feel. That's different for me now. That looks a lot different. I may not be asking all the people how they're doing, but when I do ask somebody, I'm generally, I do want to hear what you have to say. And that's hard for people. That's hard for people, cause it's happened to all of us. Right. Mm-hmm. We've been super vulnerable and we've said something and the person is just like, oh, that's great. Yeah. Like, and you're just like, shit, I just, I open my heart to you and you're okay. Or, sometimes it turns back to what they're going through. And so, yeah, especially when it comes, I think with, the topic that we talk about a lot in here and what has become like my, my passion is that, if you are having that conversation with somebody, just be authentic, be sincere and be ready to listen. And that overwhelms a lot of people. God knows, and everybody knows who's listening to this podcast enough as I am not going to say the right thing. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Like, I have that as being, it's okay now. And if I don't know now, I can get somebody. There's ways to, there's obviously if someone's really in emotional distress, then, the first thing I tell them is, call the crisis hotline, dial 988 and talk to a professional or, go to the hospital. But that's not what they need all the time. Sometimes it's just being sincere and listen to what they're saying. And sometimes when they're telling you is to like relate back with them and you hear me say me too a lot, like yeah me too, like yeah I'm scared, I'm lonely, I'm angry, there's a lot of things to go through, but yeah, I think that's something on both ways. The person, when you're struggling, you gotta open up your heart, you gotta be, open up to safe people. But then if you're the person that's receiving, or if you're asking to how someone to really listen to how they're doing, because most of the time we're just going to tell you what. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's great.
Doing great.
It's great. Yeah, it's
good.
Wonderful. Yeah,
well, that's good. Yep.
Yeah, and then when like we talked about before, then all of a sudden I start telling you stuff's bad. Oh God, I gotta go. My got another call or something like that. So it's a two-way street. But
yeah, and I know I don't want to say there's karma or anything like that, but like. Within the positions that I've been in as a leader, as a nurse who is supposed to be there for people and care for people, I think that, we give a lot out with that, and we could say that's our job. That's what we do. And but there's probably something that as a human being propelled you into doing that kind of service related job. But many times the professionals who also have to cope with life things on their own, tragedies, families, social stuff, their own patients and stuff like that, and feeling stressed. A lot of times, we don't ask for help, or you always hear the adage, you're a nurse, oh, you're your own worst patient, right? My wife is a nurse, I'm a nurse. I had a medical scare a couple years ago that led me to reevaluating my life. And it wasn't, and I could see the symptoms that were occurring right at the moment, and the people that were involved, I've shared with them and stuff like that. But, there was probably a lot of things that I could have done or said leading up to that point. And even when I came to the realization, like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go to the hospital right now. Like, I wasn't having a heart attack or anything like that. I wasn't like that where, I fell over, but I was like, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to make this minimally impactful to anybody else. I woke up my wife. Hey, I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm just letting you know, calmly, because it was early in the morning. And she's like, you're crazy, And then, she looked at what I was talking about. She's like, oh, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, yeah, I know. But it took that incident to kind of not only ask for help, because I really wasn't asking. I was like, hey, I want to take care of myself. Don't worry about it. I'll let you know what's going on. I try to minimize the negative impact to the family. But at the same time, I guess it was a passive way of, hey, I might need your help here, or could second opinion or something like that. And even though she called me crazy at the time, she was at least alert enough to look and observe and go, yeah, you do need help. Let's get you there. We'll figure it out. Because now it's, it's serious. So, you don't have to be a nurse. You don't have to be a leader to be in the same shoes where you yourself don't ask for help, or feel like it's the right time to talk about things and bring up those things. But I think, if you do, hopefully the person on the other end is receiving. And then if they don't have the time to receive, or like, I'd love to hear the rest of this, but I got to go. It's hard not to take that personal, because you're sharing something personal with them. But I think, being alive, being able to talk to maybe somebody, finding an opportunity to share it with somebody. And I think that's important. I think you may not feel that way many times. And there's been times that I feel like there's no one to talk to. I feel detached from this and that and the other. And I think surrounding yourself, and I think maybe that's part of the reason why, I was a patient, I am a patient of the VA, but helped me to gravitate to seek employment there for that connection. But if I were to have a discussion about something that was related to maybe post-stress traumatic type of things with the military, or maybe it's not the military, maybe it was the transition after the military that had some sort of secondary trauma, that somebody would probably either relate or understand and probably get me to the next step. And I think, but it is important, and it's hard. It's hard to talk. It's hard to share those things. I mean, you and I've met occasionally for certain things like that. And I appreciate you sharing with me what you shared with me before coming online, and this opportunity to be able to talk and maybe touch somebody else's life to, that something resonates and they find common, and they might feel empowered to be able to share some of their personal story, or maybe seek help. I think it's important, and it's when you feel like there's nothing else or no one else, or you don't deserve it. That's the other thing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So
and I think, the part, we talked about before, I have it, that it's definitely, this is the responsibility of the person to reach out to help them. But we were talking about, the reaction of it, how you deal with it. And I had a quote here. I was going to save it for later, but I think it kind of ties into what we're kind of talking about. You could remove the nurse part about it, and it kind of applies. But as a nurse, we have the opportunity to heal the mind, soul, heart, and body of our patients. They may forget your name, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I think a lot of that comes back to, take the nursing part about it, what you're just talking about. When you're asking people, how their day is, and you're being sincere and authentic, people don't forget that.
Yeah.
And that interaction could be, honestly, don't overstate it, but that could be the reason that somebody doesn't make a bad decision that day, or really feels. And that's really important. And it applies to nursing, but it applies to anything else. You can take it out and just see that we have the opportunity to heal the mind, soul, heart, and body of anybody. Yeah.
Yep. And you don't have to be a leader.
They don't even know your name. It's how they treated you in the line at the grocery store, how you dealt with them when they're when they're acting crazy. Like, you don't need to, think about it. It's a concept that really helps if we are sincere and authentic about how we feel about other human beings and ourselves.
You have unsung heroes, and you have heroes that don't even know that they have that potential to impact someone's life in that way, and possibly save their life if that's the case.
Yeah, we all have that possibility. We really do. That's the thing. That's why this whole thing. It takes a whole village to raise a kid, but I think it's going to take the whole world to solve this problem of veteran warrior suicide. That's just you can make a difference. That one phone call, that one that hour of listening. It makes a difference. So. I don't want to. We're rolling along. You have a long nursing career, so we can. If we went through all that, we probably need about 5 hours. But you probably held. I won't sum it up, but I'll just start off this. Sure. But you probably held every nursing job that's possible.
Yeah.
In the Navy, right?
I've had a variety of them. Okay, there's still some that would have been cool to have to assume, but I've worked and had a very full and rewarding career as a nurse and an officer in the Navy, and it was really, really good. I've done all kinds of different things from teaching to providing direct care.
Yeah.
One thing that, looking at me as a male nurse, if you can get kind of the Greg Fokker out of your mindset from Meet the Parents, which,
or
is
MERS
also
that we call
the
my son,
MERS,
yeah.
right. And if he ever wants to talk about some things like that, I'd love to speak with him. And I always love doing this, even when I taught with Otterbein. There's a huge, not only responsibility, but I would say it's an honor and privilege to be able to provide care for people that are coming into the world, babies. Right. So I did that, and helping moms and dads and families with that aspect. And I think probably one of the reasons why I gravitated that, first of all, was most men aren't doing that. Most men were kind of doing mainly nursing, OR, anesthesia, PACU, ER. And I was actually geared to probably doing those things. And my first duty station was being on a maternal infant unit. And I'm like, what? Has to be a mistake. But you go where the need is, you do what you're told, and you grow, and you go elsewhere. But I found myself, and I felt like the knowledge that I had and the type of care that I provided, and the team that I work with to provide care, was empowering to the patient. But then what I found out was what I could do as a man in support of the family and make them more connected with one another to meet the needs of the mom and the baby, and to have a healthier foundation, hopefully. That was empowering to me. And I felt like I would have to go back and get some advanced training and education and certifications, a lactation consultant, all these different things that most men in nursing aren't doing, most men in healthcare aren't doing. But yet I felt like you weren't the rooster in the hen house, although some people tend to make you feel that way. I felt like it was just part of what I needed to do to be able to provide the best care in that aspect. And I would want that for anybody receiving care who is a family member as well, going through that type of healthcare system. So, and then years later, I get into leadership and get into different roles and are leading people to deal with the stressors that they're dealing with and the demands. And now it's broad. It's not just women's health. It's ER, it's OR, it's PACU, it's all kinds of different things. It's deployment, it's humanitarian efforts. And helping providers to deal with their own stress, which they're so gung-ho on treating the patients that they have meltdowns and things like that. And they don't know how to deal with the basic things. And here I am, and I'll give you an example. Like, I had a physician come to me, and we were just talking like how we're talking right now, and all of a sudden breaking down in tears and just kind of beside herself. And I said, you know what, let me do one thing for you. This is going to seem strange. I'm not trying to get crazy or with you. And I got a trash can that I had in my little office space, and I had some foam, I don't know, foam rubber or whatever from packaging that we had. And I kicked it up. I put her feet up on there. I took her shoes off. And she's like, what are you doing? Like, she's looking at me like now the focus is not so much of the pain that she was going through. What is this guy going at? And I took her shoes, and I whipped out some polish, and I started shining her shoes, and we started talking. And her stress went down, like her problems. It didn't mean that they went away. And we just talked about those things. And we were just having it wasn't bourbon. Yeah. It was boots, feet up, and me, who's a leader, shining her shoes. And I'd never had that done to me before. So it was just whatever popped into my mind, and I did that. And, but sometimes it takes moments like that where as leaders, as healthcare providers, as human beings, that we take that time to be able to prop somebody up and shine their shoes for them. Yeah. I mean, so so I tried it with her, and it worked. And then I tried it with other people, and it seemed like it worked. And before I knew it, I was having people come to my space.
Like,
it didn't even work for me. Like, hey, you had a good, I love the shine on those shoes. Can you they stopped telling me about the problem, and I'm showing shoes.
It wouldn't work with the Army now, because they don't shine boots in with every day. They'd be like, oh, no.
Yeah, we did that, and we had a nice coffee. I had a little French press coffee maker that I had, and that sounds very bougie on deployment. We were on a ship, and I was like, you know what, if I can just have hot water, I'll make my own coffee. And did that. And I did that with people, and they felt like they were removed from their environment for a moment, and they were the focus. And I think that's what's important for wherever you're at. I was in teaching in academia and Otterbein, and for some of the students, they need that. Sometimes it's the faculty members and staff members that need that as well.
So being a male nurse, I have one in the house, we like to make the joke of like the MERS and Fokker. We don't call them, we call them MERS. We don't the Fokker thing. So do you still think there's a stigma around being a male nurse now, this many years later into it?
Gosh. I would like to say that there's probably not. And I think, if you see the old advertisements, we've come a long way, baby, with females being nurses and doctors and engineers and different things, the different commercials for different products. I think we've come a long way in the fact that men occupy more percentage of nurses in general. However, like I just mentioned, not everybody is working in every specialty. I would say probably a majority of nurses that are men are working in your ERs, your ORs, your PACUs, and anesthesia. And I don't know if it's because it could be monetarily incentivized. It could be the science and technology of it all. And maybe there's a stigma that if I'm working as a male nurse in mental health, and there are men that work in mental health as well, or working on in OB related type of fields, that, well, why are you there? Are you kind of weird to be here? Are you here for the right reasons? Can I trust you? And this profession, there is a lot of trust that you don't have the opportunity to earn with a patient as you come with them. So there's a lot of a blank check trust that's being provided to you from the patient to be able to provide care to them. So, I am sensitive to that. That's why, if a male is working as a nurse, whatever they can do, whatever subspecialty, especially they get into, get as much education is never going to hurt you. Get as much education as you can, get the certifications, and they all mean they have a certain value. Mm-hmm. They help to maybe put the patient's mind at ease, like, oh, you're a lactation consultant? Really? You are? But then they see that your credential, no, I actually am. Just like the women who actually go and get this certification, I can help you with this. And I can tell you, and I always joke with the patients, I'm like, I've never physically breastfed either. Have you? No? Okay. Well, I have some knowledge.
If you listen to me, you might be able. If you don't,
I can help you. I can help you. I've helped other women. So I think that the stigma is still there. I think it's maybe a good thing that maybe it's kind of there, because it at least for me during my time when I was in active duty with direct patient care, and then you get the naysayers that are there kind of egging you on too. It kind of fueled me to do whatever I could for my patients, and decrease the doubt that I had in myself in providing the care by getting that extra education and having contact. I mean, I would have people that I might have forgot their names. I never really forgot faces, but they would be coming to me screaming down the aisles in a Target stateside. And, it's a woman and my wife's with me in a cart with our child. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And thank you for helping me with my breastfeeding. And I'm like, what? And my wife's like, what's going on? And so it's an awkward situation, but I think the impact that hopefully I had on that person's life and providing the best nursing care that I could. And I had great nurses teach me. So that's the other thing too. If you're a male in the nursing, I would say to your son and anybody, learn as much as you can for what you're going through in your education, but look at the good ways and the bad ways to do things and incorporate that into your practice with your personality and meeting the patient's needs and meeting the patients where they are at that time and for what they're there for is important. So
it's interesting because like when you just bring it's when you look your bio and the times I talk to you about it, I remember my son was doing his OBGYN rotation, and it was like the things he was telling was awful, and there's a part of me as a parent, I'm like, like what the like it just wasn't receptive, it was where they were at, the Findlay or the hospital is at. Maybe it was just because a lot of first time moms are just like you see, and you see that, and you see like your son going through that, and you're like, wow, like how many guys are getting pushed out of this thing. And the funny thing with me and the nursing, I see my son. I'm not in the business by any means, but just watch my son. But it is funny what you said too. Is I try to talk to my son about this, is finding what you're finding you're passionate about, like he's on the transplant ward now. And then like if you talk to anybody, like if this better than me, like as soon as your son's a nurse, he needs to go into travel nursing. And then they're like, he needs to become a nurse anesthesiologist, or he needs to become a nurse practitioner. And it's funny, like my wife is even always like, become a anesthesiologist. That's where you make the most. Nurse anesthesiologist makes most money. But then, I'm more like with him, and it is funny to hear you say that. Those are the ones, as a male, then they're like, oh yeah, go to ED, and I'm like, I like that's the last place I want my son to go. And if it's my own reasons of like, dealing with daily trauma and all that kind of stuff, that's just I don't want him to have to do that. But it's like finding that personality, and there's a a nurse friend of mine. He's older, has been doing it for a long time, like you, and he's still just a normal like bedside nurse. He's like, there's nothing wrong with it. He's like, I keep telling these younger kids, like, it's like I just said that quote, they impact people's life. That's what they need. Not everybody needs to be a nurse anesthesiologist or nurse practitioner, but there's nothing wrong with having the certification. Just do what you enjoy, and that's the thing. It's but I just was wondering with my son, because I feel bad sometimes when we call him a nurse. Maybe sometimes I do, but it's because and it's always funny to me when you say that, right? Like I like to mess with people and say, I have a nurse in my family, and everyone's like daughter comes up so fast. Yeah, and it's so funny to be like, no, it's my oldest son. Like, oh, okay. Like,
I mean, you see my name, and it's really hard to, unless you know the language, that it's tied to any gender. So a lot of correspondence that I would get from schools or businesses or anything would be ma'am, she, right? Yeah. So the stigma is also with the belief that the majority of your nurses are female, therefore I must be talking to a female. And that's not necessarily the case. But I think with certain subspecialties, I think there is a comfort level and maybe an expectation that all women health related types of things will be handled by women, which is completely understandable. I understand that, especially when you consider any kind of trauma or anything like that. But I would also argue the fact that, I don't know what a uterine contraction feels like. I don't know what that feels like. But you know what? I see that you're in pain, regardless of where that originates from and stuff like that. And as a nurse, as a human being that has compassion for you, I want to do what I can to minimize or reduce or cure you of that pain and make you a healthier person, to where you can have a higher quality of life. And I think that really is the focus. And I think if you can capitalize on that in your interaction with the patients, and not every patient's going to buy into how you present to it. But I remember like having a conversation with someone like, I've never breastfed before. That's my admission to you. Have you? No. Okay. Well, I have some knowledge. Do you? Yeah, I have some. Let's work together. And that's the other thing, involving the patient in their own care. If they want to be. Some people want to be told exactly what to do, and it doesn't matter if it's a male or female provider or nurse telling them what they need to do, and that's fine too. It like I said, you almost have to tailor it to the individual in that interaction that you have, with the goal of having the impact of having hopefully a positive impact on their health, or at least their experience while they're in your hands.
Yeah, I didn't bring it up for like a negative, the negative part of it, but it's essentially I brought it more up to talk about like it's I don't care. Like I have, like I've told my sons before, like, I have such a respect for anybody that's nursing, because like a lot of people have it in a different way. My son, cares in a different way than I, he served in a different way than I served in the military. Like, and you were able to do both, both in the military and in the nursing career. But it's definitely like he serves by caring. Like I just, when I see my son, there's like a person that's like just immense compassion, to be able to do that. And we're, I'm blessed to have him in my family, but just to see nurses that do what they do, and especially the roles that you run, when I read your bio and go over that, the majority of the time you're probably taking care of dependents, right? The wives of service members, and and what a lot of people don't know is they don't have a lot of support, because they've been moved from place to place, and sometimes the husband's not around, or even the service member, they're going, they're fighting that, I'm supposed to be a sailor, but now I'm a mom. So, there's a ton of respect that goes, out to the career that that you had in the Navy, and then also the roles you held, dealing with, the prenatal stuff and all that stuff. I can't thank you. I'm sure there's so many, like you said, those women that run down the aisle and thank you. I mean, I'll thank all of them except the one that yelled at me, because she didn't read my wife's chart. But yeah, there's a lot of comfort that you guys are provided to, not just sailors, and but also the dependents. That's huge. And we have active duty members that I think as tough as it is for guys, and this may sound sexist, it's not intended to be, but I think being not only a dependent of a service member who is of childbearing age or beyond, but if you are an active duty military female, married or single,
and in your childbearing years, that your health, their health, that their health needs, and then if they are pregnant or have a child or children, I think that makes it's tough. Like whatever I went through and the stories that I have, that is a tough place to be. And then trying to, I don't know, prove yourself and contribute, right? Even if you know you can back up what the expectations with what you can do in your performance. I think doing all that and managing it, and even if you're not managing it or someone else is helping you, the guilt that might be with that. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that the dynamics that I think women who serve and or on dependents of folks that serve, I think there's a huge unspoken burden that's on them, and expectation that's on them that's different than the military man that serves. And I think when you have care providers, whether physicians, nurses, or whoever, or leaders of those folks, is having that understanding, and then policies. If you're a policymaker, if you're in a position where you're going to be policies that support those things, and sometimes we have policies that look like we support women in uniform, and for whatever reason, we don't necessarily meet the expectation of the policy. We say we do, it looks like we do, but then we don't. I mean, and breastfeeding was one of the things where women were breastfeeding in their cars or in a bathroom, or maybe in somebody's office if they didn't have one, and so meeting their need. And it seems like, wow, really? But yet, if you look at the paperwork that shows that we support women, it looks like it's there, but not every place is the same in their support of women. And I think it's that we were one of the first. My last duty station was at a branch health clinic. I was the OSC, and one of the last things, and it seems like very small, but I think it sent a powerful message to not only the team, the staff, and healthcare providers, but people that would walk into the clinic and see how you support the active duty women. We were the first ones to get these Mamava pods, lactation pods, and we have them all throughout the VA, which I was like just surprised when I was coming in as a patient as well as applying for a position there. And I was like, gosh, they have like probably 5 or 6 of these things here. And we had one at our clinic. And for every woman that was breastfeeding or in uniform or thinking about becoming pregnant, or maybe was going to have a baby someday, what that message shows is that we have your back. We have a place that's clean, supportive of your breastfeeding and your health of you and your child. And there's room in there for 2 people if they want to be, or a family member or friend, or you can charge your phone up and stuff like that. But it's like little things like that go a long way. And it was a chunk of money to do that. And it took a lot of people to buy into that. It wasn't just me making a decision and cashing a check and contacting the vendor to make it happen. There was a lot of logistics and buy-in for the command and where you would put this at and stuff like that. So the policy was still there. And that was the thing that you had. Hey, there's a policy. We need to adhere to the policy, be compliant, but then we really need to show the women that we're there for them. And that's just a very small aspect. There are other needs and things like that that go unchecked, that in policy we look like we have it, but we don't have it all together from one place to another. And I think that there's a opportunity to, within the service, as well as veteran healthcare and the private sector, that there's an opportunity to do better. So
there's always opportunity to do better, right?
Yep.
Keep moving forward.
Yep.
We've approached the couple-hour mark, so a couple more questions. If you don't, anything else you want to talk about? Nursing?
No, I mean, it's a great career. Just if anybody's pondering that or thinking, or I don't have a high enough GPA, or or I'm switching from doing engineering and I feel like I want to do nursing. Talk to a nurse, to find out what's real out there, what's going on with them. Talk to bedside nurses. Talk to people that are in leadership positions. Talk to people in various positions. If it's a military person, talk to somebody that's done it. If you're thinking about, there are many opportunities for scholarship, like I was able to take advantage of one. Other opportunities for people to get into healthcare, especially now the demand since COVID, a lot of incentive programs out there to even get into healthcare, medicine, as well as nursing. That part of that education could be either subsidized or help support, or even a full ride. It might require a certain return on investment to where you're working for an institution or the military or whatever, but you'll probably get more out of it than.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out. My son applied for the 2-year naval nursing scholarship and didn't get it.
Okay.
Which which is very interesting a couple of years ago. But it was funny about it. Like it was interesting. Like he was the only one that ever talked about the military, and it was kind of a thing. And it's hysterical. Like when it didn't happen, it was there's a part of me was like, man, like really smart guy, like athletic, college athlete. Like what? Why didn't he get it? Yeah, I'm like, and then I remember somebody being like, "Well, if he didn't get it, who didn't get it?" But like, I know it worked out bad, but it was so funny. Like, it was this, it didn't happen, right? And I remember him bringing it up, and he was just like, "I'm kind of glad because he's just not the service wasn't for him." And it's when you look at life, and that just wasn't meant to be, I guess, for him, because I think he would have. There's a part of him that was probably like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this. It's free. Like I'll get 2 years of free," but I don't think he,
And
it was
it's
for him.
hard to
it's
think
not for
that
him.
far.
Yeah,
it's really hard because you're young and you don't know.
But
if he ever wants to talk, certainly I'd be happy to talk. I know the Navy aspect of it, and things change even then. I will say that if he's in the state of Ohio, which I think you mentioned, I learned something because I have two kids. Well, one child just graduated, but the other one's in college right now. There is I don't know how I even came across it other than working with the Ohio State VA folks. And I had GI Bill benefits that I was giving to my kids. They were dividing that up. But there is a Ohio War Orphans Scholarship. Now you think, well, I'm still here. My kids aren't orphaned, right? It's more of a catchment type of educational opportunity. If the member, the sponsor, it has a certain percentage of disability that's annotated or documented, and they have a DD-214 showing that they had an honorable discharge. If they have those two things, the application deadline, I believe, is, let me think here, May 15th, I think it is. I think it's May 15th. You have to look at the website, but May 15th. And all it requires is the member to write down their child's or dependents. It could be a wife, it could be a son or daughter, their information, the school that they're going to, that they graduated high school, or if they're anticipating graduation at a certain date, turn that application in on the 15th. Now I think you can even do it electronically. Have a copy of the DD-214 that shows that you have an honorable discharge, and the disability VA designated letter that shows that you have a certain percentage of disability. And I think if it's, goodness, I hope I don't mess this up, if it's 50% or above, that goes into the consideration for a scholarship. That's the requirement. July, they meet, and then by either late July or early August, you find out the results, which the money varies. It could be anything from 75% to 100% paid tuition. And I will say that my children have benefited through having my residual GI Bill benefits, but then that has helped them out tremendously for the state of Ohio to have that. Because I don't think that they had that back in the day when I was even going to school for undergrad, which would have been kind of cool because maybe I could have used it. The member themselves can use it, or their dependents, up through a bachelor's degree. So it was nice. My son had 4 full years, and my daughter is getting the same. His started off at 100%, then COVID hit, and then I think it went like 78, 80, 80%. I think right now, I think it's like close to 80% or something like that. But it's a great help with tuition cost and things like that on the rise. It'll pay for both public schools and it'll pay a certain percentage of private schools. So you do have choice within that. So if you have kids that are still in school, they can take advantage
of that. If I had Josh here, he'd be posting that, but I'll post that. I'll find that and post that in the report of the Patriots. That's a great opportunity. I've heard of it before. And now I feel like it's another reason why I need to go back to the VA and get re-rated on some stuff, but that's all right. That's a whole different story.
Well, I'll walk you there if you want. You just look me up.
You and my dad. My dad's chomping at the bed. He's not here today, but
we'll help connect the dots.
I feel like I'm gonna get kidnapped one of these days. My dad's gonna come down. I'm gonna get hog tied, and I'll be like, "Where are you taking me?" And he's gonna take me to the VA. It'll be fine.
Yeah, you come there for a coffee. You come there for a coffee, and we'll just walk around.
It's a trap,
and you'll find out you've been.
Yeah, I'll be like, my dad's gonna try to take me on a trip. I'm like, "Where are we going?" No, but so we're heading to the end of this. A couple more questions as we go. So we talked a little bit about mental health, obviously. And our own, before we got on screen about, where we both have been with that. So, with all the focus on the veteran or the warrior class mental health, what is one thing that we're not doing that we need to be doing, in your opinion? And it could be, just your own personal opinion or what you've seen. What do we need to be doing that we're not?
so I'm still new within the VA. And
it doesn't have to be VA, just anything.
Well, just in general. And I try to think of like the things that they do for veteran outreach and things like that. And I think they're doing a good job. There's always room for improvement. I think that, and this is what I really appreciate about opportunities like this, I think for people in the general public, as well as working anywhere in healthcare or the VA or federal governments, to have these conversations, they can be lighthearted. They can start off, they could be centered around a bourbon or a food or something like that, and then kind of get into it. I think that's, and just being very simple and asking the questions and being sincere and having the time to listen. And sometimes, again, I think I shared with you about my father-in-law. He was one. I had come back from deployment, and everybody asking, "Hey, how's everything going? How was it?" And of course, as the military person, you sit there, "Oh, everything was fine." And I can tell you, with that first deployment as a married couple with very young children, the reintegration back into society was, I felt it looked like it should be good. It was nice. Everybody, families reunited, everything's good, but there is stuff because they're used to you not being there. Yeah. So you're reintegrated, and then your sense of value and place in the world is not what it was before you left. And I think that, and not to say that could lead into, but for some, we did experience folks that I knew and looked up to and interacted with who lost spouses due to suicide for whatever reason. And I think that the dialogue needs to occur. I think sometimes when you have these, and maybe it's somebody kind of being an intermediary, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's somebody they don't even know, maybe it's talking to clergy. I think we need to be more comfortable, or at least be a little bit more, I don't want to say aggressive, but assertive. You hear the word intrusive, and I think that has a negative connotation. Who wants to be intruded upon? But I think if we're engaging is probably the best word possible, and having some sort of compassion and value for another human being. And maybe you're not going to have the answers. Maybe you're going to stumble in your words. Yeah. Maybe you don't know what to say. But sometimes that's not all that makes the difference. Maybe it's just having that presence of someone actually caring on the other side to get you to where you need to go. And maybe it's more than one session. And I don't mean session. Maybe it's more than one interaction. Maybe it's getting somebody else involved. And I'm not saying I haven't figured it out. Those are some things that I think as a society we can do probably a better job. I could do a better job at, and the thing is we're all wrapped up in the things that we do on a daily basis, our comfort zone, our challenges with work, our family and stuff like that. And sometimes until it becomes a tragedy, we're never faced with it. Until it comes up on the news, we're never faced with it. Mm-hmm. So how do we interact with that? I mean, and how do we deal with that? And I think that maybe to minimize the risk of those things occur, and they're always going to occur. And sadly enough, you're not going to remove the risk. But I think if you really are sincere and you want to be a part of maybe helping to reduce that risk, maybe you first start off by, having a conversation with somebody and how are you doing today? No, really seriously, how are you doing today? Yeah. And having a conversation.
Yeah, intrusive isn't a bad, I get what you're saying. That's not a bad way to do it, but it comes down to it's like really caring. Like, I think, I've gotten a lot better lately, not lately in the past couple of years, and really focusing on, with Ports with Patriot come on and talking about mental health and my own parts of it. Everybody's always there when
it's easy.
It seems like the really bad news, something bad, then you're going to get the prayer warriors that are out there, and don't take that the wrong way. And if you do, I don't care. But everyone's out there just but it's like when it's just checking in, when things could be bad, you just don't know. I had a friend of mine that went through something, I sent him, we DM'd for a while, the guy I hadn't talked to in 30 years. And, I say friend because he's a classmate at school, and he's going through something and just, wanted to reach out and say, hey man, it's okay. This is, whatever shame that's going on, just forget about it. But then I didn't hear from him for a week, and I just, a little bit longer, didn't hear from him. I just said, hey man, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. I'm here to talk, if you need it. And it was crazy. It's just a normal thing. I was thinking about it, and he was literally thank you, because everybody's there when,
it's the quiet times.
Because it's there's always that. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's when things are going bad, there's a bunch of people that are there. But things could be when it's obviously going bad. But I think with the suicide epidemic is things are going bad. They're just not, there's the people just they can't see it. You know what I mean? That's the big thing. You can't see that it's bad, right? Yeah. My dog died. My wife passed away. I got cancer. The bad things that's when people want to like, come in on it. But like, you got to understand that every day it's bad. It could be bad. Something's bad is going on for that person. It's not going well. Something's not working in their life. And I don't think there's anything wrong with really, if you really care, and intrusive is not the way, but ask the follow-up question. And then,
right.
And also now with me, if it's something doesn't seem right or feel right, just ask somebody, like ask them, like, dude, are you like, I have people in the bourbon community that are just like, they'll self-eject, right? They'll be like, I'm leaving the group. I'm doing this. I'm not doing that. And like, or I haven't seen them on, Facebook group. I'm like, I'll reach out and be like, Chai, is everything okay? Like, what do you like? Why are you leaving the bourbon group? And people will be like, oh, I generally want to know. It goes back to being authentic. Is like, ask that question, because if the person is having, maybe they do have an alcohol problem, they're trying to cut it. Yeah. But there's opportunities to help them. I'm here to listen. What do you need? Like, dude, I don't give a shit if you're not drinking alcohol anymore. I care about you as a human being. Like, what do you need? Like, I have some people you can talk to. So like, I think that's important. The dialogue is,
I think
is
that
key. And the dialogue isn't just between the person and, the counselors, the medical part. That is important. The professionals, but I not to be a dick, but that's not working right now. It has to.
It's only a part of it.
Yeah, it has to change.
That person goes home, their provider's not with them.
You have to talk and be there and listen to, and when the dialogue start, like you said, a lot of people's, the similarities come out, and they start to realize they're not the only person going through this. They're not the only person that happened to, and they can be like, wow, that happened to you, and you're okay. Wow, okay, I'm going to get through this, because suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
You can be in a family situation or a home situation where there's no one there. You can have a home situation where people are there, and you could still feel lonely and detached.
Yeah.
So, and you can go see a provider, you can see clergy. And I think if you come home at the end of the day, or if you have, it's those quiet times, right, where it's your thoughts.
Yep.
And if you don't feel like anyone cares, or you have no one really, if you really needed somebody, I think that's, and it's not for every person, for every case, but I think that feeds into a cycle of if you're unable to cope or don't have the resources, and you also then feel alone, regardless if it's the reality or not, to that person it's the reality, and then maybe the solution, or if they're ashamed of something in addition to for an action. The reason why I am alone is because I did this thing, and now my relationship with the person that was there is no longer there. So, but again, I think this is where I think people in general they're unseen heroes, where they have an opportunity to really have a positive impact on somebody, to where, and I'm not saying social media and stuff like that, that's all what it is. I think having a conversation, looking somebody in the eyes and asking, is everything all right? And, are you sure you need somebody to talk about it? Maybe not now. Call me. Here's my number. Or let's meet and have a conversation, and then maybe get into it. Maybe there's a little bit of a warming up to that point. But once you're in, like you said, someone finds out they have cancer, they have this bad thing, prayer lines are established. Those are all important things. People are there in your corner. And then all of a sudden, it's not that people don't care, but people get busy and wrapped up. It is the reality of things. So I think where people could do better is, come back and periodically check. Don't assume that somebody else is going to check on it. My wife had a traumatic brain injury. She's fine. She's fine. This was years ago. And, I sent out a message, and I was going through my PhD program at Ohio State. I sent out messages to everybody just to kind of let them know what's going on. And I had very strong support from the College of Nursing at the Ohio State. They were sending us meals, and I had small kids at the time. My family was there to support and stuff like that. And everybody was there sending their prayers and checking up on my wife, would physically come in the hospital, and all that was great and very much appreciated. The challenge is when everybody goes back home and you're home by yourself. To where are you able to meet that person who's now recovering in their needs, and everything worked out okay. But I would say that's probably the loneliest points. You could be surrounded by your immediate family trying to help you, but you feel detached. And I'm not speaking for my wife. I've been there for certain things, where is everybody? And you don't like, where is everybody? And you're like, woe is me type of thing. But I think that what would help reduce things. And I had a mom that went through probably a lot of anguish due to childhood trauma and things like that carried on into adulthood. And sometimes, whether I was deployed, if I was home, if I was in California, wherever I was at, if I got in a conversation with her, it would sometimes last hours. And sometimes it would be like, hey, how you doing? Well, I knew how she was doing, but I would ask the question. It would lead into hours of a phone call. And it's like, it's getting late. I got to, so how do you end that? And there's not an art to that. Sometimes it would end off, okay, hey, I'll see you, I'll call you again, that type of thing. So they're looking forward to your call or email, whatever that's going to be. But we have to take the time. We have to care enough to ask and listen, and not be so prescriptive. Like, well, this is what you need to do. You need to put your head out of your ass. You need to do this. You need to do this. Because that's not necessarily all. Sometimes it is, but most of the times it's not. It's just needing that caring person to listen, and maybe not giving any kind of instruction. And then like, let's meet, or let's go do this, or, have you thought about this? And if you need somebody to be there with you, I can be there with you, because I can understand how that might be tough, and having that empathy with somebody, even if you've not lived in their circumstance or shoes.
Yeah.
And owning up to that, and just offering whatever you can, and checking in. We think of parents and family members and how they influence us. And, you could have parents that weren't engaged or present, Why are you the way you are? Well, because certain people were present, but the people that are present in your life have impact as much as the people that weren't, or whatever. I think that if we're asking those critical questions, or asking people how they are doing, be invested enough to be able to have a presence, come back, follow up, check. Yeah. Healthcare can do that. They do it. They try to do it. They can do better. But as people in the society, we all can do a better job.
Yeah. I think that this is just always what I love about talking and having guests on and talking about this topic. But, this was something we were talking about earlier today, but, it's like being a good listener, right? So to be a good listener, there's some things you need to be objective, right? Mm-hmm. Take nothing personal, know nothing, give no advice, take no action for 48 hours, and keep emotion out. And and that's a lot of the times, like you said earlier, about listening to people. And a lot of the time it's just, I'm guilty of it because I'm a fixer, right? I want to fix it. But sometimes, I have my opinion on everything, right? And that's what it is. It needs. But, and you said before, like the alone, that you can be surrounded by people, but be alone. And people have to understand that. Like, it's not just being physically around people. You can be with your family all the time, but you could be isolating yourself. But yeah, it's the conversation and talk about it. Conversations like this, real conversations, I think, are the key to all of it. That's a great segue there. So,
all right.
Anything else you want to talk about?
Gosh, I'm sure I could talk to you for hours, man.
I could too as well. It's a good conversation.
Yeah.
It won't be the last conversation we have for sure.
Sure. You have to come back anytime.
But anything else you want to put out there? This is your story.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't have a story if it weren't obviously for me being involved in it, but having just, the family and friends who've supported us along this way. This whole journey, like I said, certain things that you wouldn't even think that would have had an impact into the direction or the path that you assumed, or the people and the timing of things and development of relationships and things and like that, and family and stuff like that. Whether you believe things happen for a reason or fate or whatever, when you look back at the persons and situations, if you're a self-reflecting person, like I try to be, so I can learn from it. I feel like I've been, and I realize there's a lot of people that have pain that, I have commonalities with, but I don't always have everything that is reflected in the kind of pain that they have, but can have empathy. I feel very fortunate to have had the career that I've had and hopefully have the impacts that I can at the VA and as a human being and things like that. And, and very thankful to have this opportunity to share with you.
Well, it's a privilege. It's really a privilege. I want to tell you, thank you for just under 30 years is very admirable. Thank you for your career. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank your wife for me, for that as well, and the kids, but also thank you for your continued service to the community. and the roles you're in, and then now especially back to being in the VA. Thank you, and thank you for coming on. Thank you for coming and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. So before we close out, we're gonna tonight we're gonna honor a service member who unfortunately took their life tonight. Sorry, everybody. I'm doing this on my own here. Tonight, we're going to honor U.S. Navy Petty Officer Second Class Tiara Marie Gray, 21. Tiara was born October 8th. Oh, holy cow, it's got all messed up here. In Cumberland, Tiara took her life on April 2nd, 2018 in San Diego, California. She graduated from Fort Hill High School in 2014. After graduating high school, Tiara enlisted in the United States Navy in 2015 and was assigned as a machinist mate aboard the USS Essex in San Diego, California. During her career, Tiara was diagnosed with severe anxiety, major depressive disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Tiara enjoyed knitting, sewing, volunteering at the animal shelter, and crafting natural soaps and lotions to share with her family and friends. Tiara had a proud vegetarian diet and enjoyed cooking many of her things that she loved eating. Tiara was a great role model and loved her family very much. She was known for setting a great example for all of her younger siblings. Tiara was survived by her parents, Tina and Edward, stepfather Greg, stepmother Lori, brothers and sisters Tiana, Talisa, Macy, Nick, Ian, and Presley, paternal grandparents Nick and Annette, and numerous other relatives and friends. And again, like we've always said before, if you or someone you know is in crisis and might be considering suicide, please contact the Veterans Crisis Line at 988 or 1-800-273-8255 and press 1, or text 838-255, or chat online at veteranscrisisline.net/chat. So that's all we have. We've been posting up. Like I said, thank you for coming in for episode 68. Episode 69 will be coming in a couple more weeks. We're gonna have an Army guy back. I didn't make a joke about the Navy flag up there. We're gonna have the Army flag up for a little bit, but yeah, I just want to thank you again for coming on. I want to thank everybody who tuned in for the first episode of season 3, 2015. We will see everyone in a couple weeks, and everyone have a great night and enjoy the football game. The Chiefs game is going. I'm not for the Chiefs, so, and I do have to eat credit. The guys aren't here. I do have to congratulate the Ohio State for their national champion. I feel like my hate for you the past 10 years of help. No, it's a joke before we get off about football. None of the guys are here, but 10 years ago we moved here. The Ohio State Buckeyes won when the Millers came, and then the youngest Miller is now at the Ohio State. So we feel like you're welcome, Ohio State fans. You're welcome, Josh. The Miller effect is helping you guys win it. So
there you go.
it's going to be a rough year for me, but I appreciate it. Everyone have a great night, and we'll talk to everybody in a couple weeks. Thanks.
Thank you so much.